When my only son told me I was too old to deserve happiness, I felt my heart shatter all over again. Days later, I was sitting across from him in a cafe, watching his face contort with rage as he realized I'd outsmarted him. That's when I understood that some wounds aren't meant to heal, they're meant to teach you how to fight back. If you're watching this, subscribe and tell me if you've ever had to stand up to family who only wanted you for what you could give them. They say lightning never strikes twice, but whoever said that never lived my life. The first bolt hit 15 years ago when my son, Nathan, walked out of my modest two-bedroom house and told me he was done with me. The second came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon when 6 numbers changed everything I thought I knew about my remaining years. I remembered that Tuesday like it was yesterday, though it's been nearly 6 months now. I was folding laundry, the same chore I'd done thousands of times before. The television hummed in the background, just noise to fill the emptiness of my home. I barely registered the lottery numbers being called until something made me look up. Something made me freeze, the half-folded sheet still in my hands. Those were my numbers, the ones I'd played every week for 20 years. My late husband Robert's birthday, the day we met, the day Nathan was born. I stood there, unable to move, as they repeated the numbers and announced the jackpot. $100 million. 100 million. The sheet slipped from my fingers. This can't be right, I whispered to the empty room. My hands shook so badly I could barely find my purse, barely pull out the crumpled lottery ticket. But there they were, the same 6 numbers glowing on my TV screen. For a woman who had spent her entire life counting pennies, who had worked as a hospital administrator for 30 years just to make ends meet, who had raised a son alone after Robert died of a heart attack at 42, this moment felt like stepping into someone else's dream. I sank onto my worn couch, clutching the ticket to my chest. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, wondering what Robert would say if he could see me now. Wondering what Nathan would think. Nathan. My son. My only child. The boy I'd sacrificed everything for, working 3 jobs after Robert died to keep him in good schools, to make sure he had the opportunities his father never had. The young man who'd grown increasingly distant through college, embarrassed by my modest means, my simple clothes, my lack of sophistication. The adult who, at 30, had told me he was moving to Chicago and didn't want me to contact him anymore. "You're just going to hold me back, Mom," he'd said, standing in my living room, tall and handsome in his expensive suit. "I have connections now, a future. I can't be dragging around baggage from my past." Baggage. That's what I had become to him. The woman who had held him when he cried, who had gone hungry so he could eat, who had sewn patches onto his school uniforms with trembling fingers. I was just baggage to be discarded. For 15 years, I had honored his wish. 15 years of birthdays with no calls, of Christmases spent alone, of seeing his face only through social media posts where he stood smiling with people I didn't know. I learned he had married a woman named Vanessa. I learned they had 2 children I had never met, my own grandchildren. I learned he had become successful in financial management, living in a beautiful house in a Chicago suburb. All this I observed from a distance, never reaching out, respecting the wall he had built between us. The pain had dulled over time, becoming a quiet companion rather than the sharp knife it had once been. I had built a life of modest contentment, volunteer work at the hospital, a weekly book club, a small garden I tended with care. At 60, I had accepted that this was my path. Not happy, perhaps, but peaceful in its way. And then, those 6 numbers. The weeks that followed were a blur. Claiming the ticket, meetings with lottery officials, the sudden appearance of cameras and reporters outside my small house. I took the lump sum payment after taxes, $64 million. More money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. I hired a financial advisor recommended by the Lottery Commission. I changed my phone number. I put my house up for sale, planning to move somewhere quieter. And through it all, I kept waiting for a call I both dreaded and longed for. It came on a Sunday evening, just as I was watering my petunias on the front porch. The phone rang, and when I answered, the voice on the other end sent a chill through me despite the warm May evening. "Mom? It's Nathan." 15 years of silence, broken with 2 words. My hand tightened around the phone. "Nathan," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "This is a surprise." "I saw the news," he said, and there was something in his tone I couldn't quite place. Not warmth, not love, something calculating. "Quite the windfall you've had." "No, how are you, Mom?" "No, I've missed you. Just a comment about the money." "Yes," I said simply. It was quite unexpected. "Listen, Mom," he continued, his voice taking on that smooth, persuasive quality I remembered from when he wanted something as a teenager. "I've been thinking. This is a lot for you to handle at your age." "You're what now, 60? "Yes, 60. I confirmed, something cold settling in my stomach. "You're too old to spend this money," he said bluntly. "There's no life after 50, not really. You should just transfer it to me. I can manage it properly, make it grow. What are you going to do with it anyway?" The watering can slipped from my fingers, spilling across the wooden porch. Too old. No life after 50. His words echoed in my head, each one a fresh stab to my heart. Not just the cruelty of them, but the dismissal, as if I were already dead, as if the remaining years of my life held no value, no possibility for joy or purpose. "I see," I managed to say, my voice distant to my own ears. "You haven't spoken to me in 15 years, Nathan. You told me I was baggage from your past. And now you want my money?" "Don't be dramatic, Mom," he sighed, the irritation clear in his voice. "I'm thinking practically here. You're living in that same rundown house, probably still shopping at discount stores. What do you know about wealth management? About investment? About living the kind of life this money can provide?" Each word was like acid, burning away the thin shell of hope I hadn't realized I still carried. Hope that somewhere inside this stranger was still the boy who had once loved me. "I have to go, Nathan," I said quietly. "Someone's at the door." It was a lie, but I couldn't bear to hear another word. I hung up before he could respond, then sank onto the porch swing, my body suddenly heavy with a grief that felt both old and new. That night, I barely slept. His words played on repeat in my mind. Too old. No life after 50. Transfer it to me. By morning, something had hardened inside me, a resolve I hadn't felt in years. If my son saw me as nothing but a convenient access point to wealth, then perhaps it was time he learned who I really was. I called my lawyer, a kind woman named Elaine Hoffman who had been handling my affairs since the lottery win. "I need to see you today," I told her. "It's urgent." 3 hours later, I sat in her tastefully decorated office, pouring out the whole story, not just Nathan's call, but the 15 years of abandonment, the cruel dismissal, the entitled demand. Elaine listened without interrupting, her expression growing increasingly troubled. When I finished, she leaned forward, her eyes meeting mine directly. "Margaret," she said gently, "I need to be very clear with you. What you're describing, this sudden reappearance after you've come into money, it's unfortunately common. And it rarely ends well." "What do you mean?" I asked, though part of me already knew. "I mean that people who reconnect only because of money rarely have genuine intentions," she explained. "And in many cases, they can become difficult when they don't get what they want." "Difficult how?" She sighed, removing her glasses. "Manipulative. Aggressive. Sometimes even dangerous. I've seen family members forge documents, exert undue influence, even resort to elder abuse to get access to funds." "Nathan wouldn't," I started, then stopped myself. The truth was, I didn't know what Nathan would or wouldn't do anymore. The son I had raised, the child I had loved, seemed to no longer exist. "I hope you're right," Elaine said, "but we need to be prepared. I strongly advise setting up protections now, before things escalate." I nodded slowly, a plan beginning to take shape in my mind. "What would you suggest?" The next day, Nathan called again. And the day after. Each time, his tone grew more insistent, his arguments more forceful. "You're being selfish, Mom," he accused on the 4th day. "Do you know what I could do with that money? The opportunities it could create for your grandchildren, the ones you've never even bothered to meet." The irony of his accusation struck me like a physical blow. I had never bothered to meet them, when he had been the one to cut me out of his life completely. "I didn't know I was welcome in their lives, Nathan," I said carefully. "You made it very clear you wanted nothing to do with me." "That was different," he dismissed. "I was building my career, establishing myself. I couldn't be associated with, well, with where I came from." Where he came from? My simple home. My working-class existence.
Me.
"I see," I said, the pain of his words settling into a strange, cold clarity. "And now, what's changed?" "Now there's opportunity," he said, not even attempting to disguise his true motives. "This money could set up generations of our family. But not if you waste it on whatever sad little luxuries you might want in your remaining years." Remaining years. As if I were already at death's door, instead of a healthy, active woman with potentially decades ahead of me. "I'm not making any decisions yet, Nathan," I told him, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "I need time to think."
He scoffed.
"Time is exactly what you don't have, Mom. But fine, take a few days. I'll call back on Sunday. Have an answer ready." After hanging up, I sat in my kitchen, staring at the phone. The boy I had raised would never have spoken to me this way. Somewhere along the line, he had become someone else entirely, someone cold, entitled, cruel. Or perhaps this was who he had always been, and I had been too blinded by maternal love to see it. That evening, I pulled out old photo albums, turning pages filled with images of a smiling child, a sullen teenager, a proud college graduate. I traced his face in the last photo I had of us together, his college graduation. He was already pulling away by then, embarrassed by my presence, rushing me away before his friends could meet me. But in that moment captured on film, with his arm around my shoulders, there was still a hint of the bond we had once shared. What had happened to that boy? Had money and ambition truly corrupted him so completely? Or had I failed him somehow, failed to instill the values that should have mattered? I closed the album, my decision crystallizing. It wasn't about punishing Nathan, though part of me, the wounded part, certainly wanted to. It was about standing up for myself, for my worth as a human being beyond my role as his mother or as a sudden source of wealth. The next morning, I called Elaine again. "I'm ready," I told her. "Let's move forward with everything we discussed." For the next 2 days, I met with Elaine and her team, signing documents, making arrangements, finalizing details. On Sunday morning, as promised, Nathan called. "Well," he demanded without preamble. "Have you come to your senses?" "I've made a decision," I told him, my heart racing despite my resolve. "I'd like to see you in person to discuss it." There was a pause, then a chuckle that held no warmth. "So dramatic, Mom." "Fine, I can fly in tomorrow. There's a cafe near your house, Rosemary's, I think it's called. Meet me there at noon." I agreed, hanging up with hands that trembled slightly. After 15 years of silence, I would be seeing my son face to face. Not for the reunion I had once dreamed of, but for a confrontation I now knew was necessary. That night, I barely slept. I stood before my mirror, studying my reflection, the silver threads in my brown hair, the lines around my eyes and mouth, the softness that had settled around my once slender frame. Nathan was right about one thing. I wasn't young anymore. But did that make me less deserving of respect? Of dignity? Of a future filled with possibilities?
No.
Age had not diminished my worth. It had given me wisdom I had lacked in youth. Wisdom I would need for what was to come. The next day dawned bright and clear, one of those perfect June mornings that seemed to promise good things. I dressed carefully in a simple blue dress I had bought years ago for a hospital fundraiser, applied light makeup, and clasped around my neck the small gold locket Robert had given me on our first anniversary. Inside was a tiny photo of the three of us, Robert, Nathan, and me, taken when Nathan was just 5 years old. I arrived at Rosemary's 20 minutes early, choosing a table near the back, where we would have some privacy. The cafe was busy with the lunch crowd, the air filled with the comforting sense of coffee and freshly baked bread. At 12:15, the bell above the door chimed, and I looked up to see Nathan walking in. 15 years had changed him. His dark hair was shorter now, expensively cut, with silver at the temples. He wore a tailored suit that probably cost more than a month of my old salary and carried himself with the confidence of a man accustomed to being in charge. His eyes scanned the room, passing over me at first, then returning with a flicker of recognition that held no warmth. He approached my table with measured steps, his expression carefully neutral. "Mom," he said, not bothering to kiss my cheek or offer any physical greeting. He sat down across from me, setting his expensive leather briefcase on the empty chair beside him. "Nathan," I replied, my voice steadier than I expected. "Thank you for coming." "Let's not waste time on pleasantries," he said, signaling impatiently for a server. "I have a flight back this evening." The server approached, a young woman with kind eyes who smiled at me warmly. "The usual, Mrs. Collins? Earl Grey with honey." "Yes. Thank you, Lily," I smiled back. "And for you, sir?" she asked Nathan. "Espresso. Double shot," he said without looking at her. Once she left, he turned his attention back to me, his expression calculating. "So, you've had time to think. Tell me you've made this sensible choice." I studied him, this stranger, who had once been my world. "I have made a choice," I said carefully. "But first, I'd like to ask you something." He sighed, checking his watch. "What? Why did you really cut me out of your life, Nathan? The truth, please." His expression hardened. "Does it matter now?" "It matters to me." He leaned back, a flicker of irritation crossing his face.
Fine.
"You want the truth? You were embarrassing. Your clothes, your accent, your job, all of it. I was trying to build connections with people who mattered, people with influence and class. How could I do that with a mother who shopped at thrift stores and lived in a house that looked like it might collapse any day?" Each word was like a physical blow, but I didn't flinch. "I see. And your father? Were you embarrassed by him too? By the man who worked 60-hour weeks at the factory to put food on our table?" A muscle twitched in Nathan's jaw. Dad would have understood ambition, the need to move up in the world. "Your father understood dignity," I corrected quietly. "He understood that a person's worth isn't measured by their bank account or their address." "Spare me the working-class hero speech," Nathan scoffed. "If Dad had lived, he would have wanted better for me too." "Better than what, Nathan?" "Better than a mother who loved you, who sacrificed everything for you." "Oh, please," he rolled his eyes, looking around the cafe as if bored by the conversation. "Every parent makes sacrifices. It's the job description. You don't get special points for doing what you signed up for." Lily returned with our drinks, setting them down carefully. I thanked her. Nathan didn't acknowledge her presence. After she left, I reached into my purse and withdrew a sealed envelope. "I've made my decision, Nathan," I said, placing it on the table between us. His eyes lit up, the first genuine emotion I'd seen from him. Finally seeing reason, then? He reached for the envelope, but I kept my hand on it. "Before I give you this, I want you to know something," I said, my voice low but firm. "You are the center of my world. When your father died, you became my reason for getting up each morning, for working those extra shifts, for pushing through the grief. I would have done anything for you." Something flickered in his eyes, discomfort, perhaps, or a ghost of shame quickly suppressed. "And I want you to know," I continued, "that despite everything, I still love you. Not because you deserve it, but because love isn't something you can simply turn off, even when it isn't returned." "Very touching," he said dryly. "Can I see the documents now?" I removed my hand from the envelope.
Yes.
"You can." With impatient fingers, he tore open the seal, pulling out the papers inside. His eyes scanned the first page, then widened. He flipped to the second page, then the third, his face growing increasingly flushed. "What the hell is this?" he demanded, his voice rising. "It's notification that I've transferred the entire amount, all $64 million, into an irrevocable trust," I explained calmly. "The trust will fund programs for abandoned elderly people, for children without parents, and for other charitable causes. People who have been left behind, just as you left me behind." "You can't do this," he sputtered, his face now red with fury. This is my money. It's not your money, Nathan, I said softly. It never was. You stupid old woman, he shouted, slamming his fist on the table, causing our cups to rattle. Do you have any idea what you've done? Any idea what I could have done with that money? Heads turned in our direction. The cafe had gone quiet, conversations halting as people stared. I know exactly what I've done, I replied, my voice still calm. I've ensured that my windfall will help people who truly need it. He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. This isn't over, he hissed, leaning down so his face was inches from mine. You think you've won? You haven't. I'll contest this. I'll claim you're not mentally competent. I'll take everything. I met his gaze without flinching. You're welcome to try, Nathan. But you should know that the trust documents have been reviewed by 5 separate attorneys. The trust is ironclad. Nothing is ironclad, he sneered. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Perhaps not, I acknowledged. But then again, neither do you. With trembling hands, he gathered the papers, shoving them back into the envelope. You'll regret this, he promised, his voice low and dangerous. I'll make sure of it. As he turned to leave, I said quietly, There's one more thing, Nathan. Something you missed on the last page. He paused, his back to me. The trust does include one distribution outside the charitable beneficiaries, I told him. You will receive exactly $1. Not because you deserve it, but so there can be no question that your omission from my estate was intentional rather than an oversight. He whirled around, his face contorted with rage. $1? $1? His voice rose to a shout that echoed through the silent cafe. Is that what you think I'm worth? I looked at him sadly.
No, Nathan.
That's what you decided I was worth 15 years ago. For a moment, he stood frozen, shock and fury battling on his face. Then, with a strangled sound of rage, he grabbed his briefcase and stormed out, the door slamming behind him with such force that the little bell broke free, falling to the floor with a sad tinkle. In the silence that followed, I became aware of every eye in the cafe on me. I took a sip of my tea, which had gone cold, my hands surprisingly steady despite the confrontation. Lily approached cautiously. Mrs. Collins? Are you okay? I looked up at her, offering a small smile. Yes, dear. I think I am. That night, I sat on my porch swing, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. For the first time in 15 years, I felt a curious lightness. Not happiness. The confrontation had been too painful for that, but something like peace. Like the closing of a chapter that had remained unfinished for too long. My phone rang several times. Nathan, no doubt, calling to continue his tirade. I let it go to voicemail. Whatever he had to say could wait until morning. As darkness fell, I went inside, locking the door behind me. In the hallway, I paused before the gallery of photos I had created. Images of Robert and me in happier times, of Nathan as a child, of the life we had built together. I touched one frame gently. Nathan at 7, missing his front teeth, grinning widely as he held up a fish he'd caught with his father. I'm sorry, I whispered to the image of that innocent child. I'm sorry for whatever I did or didn't do that turned you into the man you are now. I was about to turn away when I noticed something on the floor, an envelope that had been slipped under my front door. With a sense of foreboding, I picked it up. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a message in Nathan's sharp, angular handwriting. This isn't over. You'll regret what you did. I stared at the note, feeling the weight of the threat it contained. Part of me wanted to be afraid. Nathan had resources, connections, a ruthlessness I had witnessed firsthand today. But instead, I felt a strange calm settle over me. The battle with my son was far from finished. In fact, it had only just begun. But this time, I wasn't the helpless, heartbroken mother he had walked away from 15 years ago. This time I was ready. I folded the note carefully and placed it in a drawer in my desk. Then I picked up my phone and dialed Elaine's number. Margaret? She answered on the second ring. How did it go? Exactly as we expected, I told her. And Nathan just left me a note. He's threatening to fight back. We anticipated that, she said, her voice calm and professional. Are you still committed to our course of action? I thought of Nathan's face twisted with rage, of the cruel words he had flung at me, of 15 years of silence broken only by greed. Then I thought of the good the trust would do, the lives it would change, the help it would provide to those who truly needed it. Yes, I said firmly. I'm committed. Whatever comes next, I'm ready. Good, she replied. Then let's prepare for phase 2. As I hung up, a strange sense of anticipation replaced my earlier calm. Nathan thought he knew who he was dealing with, a lonely old woman who could be easily manipulated, easily frightened. He was about to discover just how wrong he was. The game had only just begun. And this time I was playing to win. I never thought I'd be sitting in a lawyer's office at 7 in the morning, planning how to defend myself against my own flesh and blood. But then again, I never thought I'd win the lottery, and I certainly never imagined my son would reveal himself to be a stranger, wearing the face of the boy I once loved. We need to be strategic, Elaine said, sliding a stack of documents across her desk. Her office was bathed in early morning light, the city outside just beginning to wake. Nathan's threat isn't idle. Men like him, men who believe they're entitled to what others have, they don't back down easily. What exactly do you think he'll do? I asked, my fingers tracing the edge of the papers. Elaine removed her glasses, rubbing the bridge of her nose. Based on similar cases I've handled, he'll likely start with legal challenges. Claiming you're mentally incompetent is the obvious first move. Then he might try undue influence, suggesting someone manipulated you into creating the trust. That someone being you, I said with a small smile.
Precisely, she nodded.
If those avenues fail, he might get creative. Or worse, desperate. Desperate how? Her eyes met mine. Margaret, when millions of dollars are at stake, people show their true colors. And those colors aren't always pretty. A chill ran through me as I remembered the rage in Nathan's eyes at the cafe, the cold threat in his note. What else was my son capable of? So, what do we do? I asked. We prepare, Elaine said firmly. First, we need to establish your mental competency beyond any shadow of doubt. I've scheduled appointments with 3 separate psychiatric specialists for comprehensive evaluations. I raised an eyebrow. 3? We're not taking chances, she explained. Next, we need to document the history of your relationship with Nathan, the estrangement, the years of silence, his sudden reappearance after the lottery win. We'll need statements from anyone who knew about the situation. My mind went to my few close friends, to my neighbors, to the staff at the hospital where I'd volunteered for years. People who had witnessed my quiet grief over Nathan's abandonment, who had heard me speak of the son who wanted nothing to do with me. I can provide names, I said. Good, Elaine nodded. And finally, we need to protect you personally. I recommend upgrading your home security system, changing your routines, being careful about who knows where you are and when. You think Nathan might? I couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't bring myself to voice the possibility that my own son might physically harm me. I think we need to be cautious, she said diplomatically, especially given the tone of his note. I took a deep breath, squaring my shoulders. Then let's be cautious. The next few days passed in a whirlwind of appointments and preparations. I met with psychiatrists who asked probing questions about my life, my decision-making, my understanding of my finances. I spoke with a security consultant who installed new locks, cameras, and an alarm system in my home. I sat with a detective who reviewed Nathan's threatening note and advised me on obtaining a restraining order if necessary. Through it all, Nathan continued to call. Sometimes he shouted, his rage spilling through the phone line. Other times he tried reason, explaining why the trust was a mistake, why I was being foolish. And occasionally, most disturbingly, he attempted manipulation, his voice softening as he spoke of family and reconciliation, as if the scene at the cafe had never happened. I let most calls go to voicemail, listening to his messages with a strange detachment. The more he spoke, the more I realized the truth. The son I had raised, the child I had loved, was truly gone. Perhaps he had never really existed at all, except in my desperate mother's heart. A week after our confrontation, I was in my garden, pruning roses in the cool morning air, when a sleek black car pulled up in front of my house. A woman emerged, tall, slender, expensively dressed, with the kind of polished beauty that comes from careful maintenance rather than nature's gift. She approached my gate with measured steps, her eyes hidden behind large designer sunglasses despite the early hour. "Mrs. Collins?" she called, her voice carrying across my small front yard. I straightened, brushing soil from my gardening gloves. "Yes. I'm Vanessa Harrington Collins," she said, her chin lifting slightly. "Nathan's wife. Your daughter-in-law." My heart skipped a beat. My daughter-in-law. A woman I had never met, never spoken to, never even seen except in glimpses through social media posts. The mother of my grandchildren. "Vanessa," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "This is unexpected. May I come in?" she asked, removing her sunglasses to reveal striking green eyes that assessed me coldly. "I believe we have matters to discuss." I hesitated, remembering Elaine's warnings about being cautious. But curiosity won out. Curiosity and perhaps a flicker of hope that this woman might provide a bridge to the grandchildren I had never known. "Of course," I said, unlatching the gate. "Would you like some tea?" Vanessa followed me into the house, her gaze sweeping over my modest living room with barely concealed disdain. I noticed her eyes lingering on the worn furniture, the outdated curtains, the simple decorations that had been my home for decades. "Nathan didn't exaggerate," she murmured, more to herself than to me.
"About what?"
I asked, setting down my gardening gloves. She turned to face me, her expression professionally pleasant, but her eyes calculating. "About your circumstances. Before the lottery, I mean." "My circumstances were modest but comfortable," I replied, gesturing for her to sit. "I'll make that tea." In the kitchen, I took a moment to collect myself, my hands trembling slightly as I filled the kettle. My daughter-in-law was in my living room, a stranger who was family, a connection to the grandchildren I had never met. What was her purpose in coming here? What did she want? When I returned with the tea tray, Vanessa was examining the photos on my mantel, particularly one of Nathan as a teenager, gangly and awkward but smiling, his arm around my shoulders. "He was so young here," she commented. "Before Chicago, before the firm." "He was 17, I said, setting down the tray. "It was taken the summer before his senior year of high school." Vanessa nodded, returning to the sofa with graceful movements. She accepted the cup I offered, taking a small sip before placing it on the coffee table. "Mrs. Collins." "Margaret, please," I interrupted. "We are family, after all." The words tasted strange on my tongue. Family. What did that even mean anymore? "Margaret," she amended, smoothing an invisible wrinkle from her tailored pants. "I'll be direct. Nathan is distraught about your decision regarding the trust." I remained silent, waiting. "You must understand," she continued, her voice taking on a persuasive tone. "This money could secure our children's future, your grandchildren's future. Private schools, college funds, opportunities that would set them up for life." "My grandchildren," I repeated softly. "Tell me about them." Something flickered in her eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or calculation. "Emma is 8. She's academically gifted, already reading at a high school level. And Michael is 6. He's showing remarkable talent in piano and mathematics." My grandchildren. Names and ages and talents. It was more than I had known before, and yet so painfully little. No personalities, no quirks, no evidence of the actual children behind these achievements. "Do they know about me?" I asked quietly. Vanessa hesitated, her perfectly manicured fingers tapping lightly on her knee. "They know they have a grandmother," she said carefully. "Nathan felt it was best not to complicate their lives with details of your estrangement." Translated, my grandchildren didn't know I existed, not really. I was at most a vague concept, perhaps even a cautionary tale. "I see," I said, something cold settling in my chest. "And now? Now that there's money involved? Will they suddenly learn about their grandmother?" A flush crept up Vanessa's neck. That's unfair. Is it? Asked mildly. You and Nathan have kept me from my grandchildren for their entire lives. Nathan hasn't spoken to me in 15 years. And now, when I win the lottery, suddenly family is important. People make mistakes, she said, her voice hardening. Nathan regrets the distance between you. He wants to make amends. Does he? I raised an eyebrow. That's not the impression I got when he called me too old to deserve happiness, or when he stormed out of the cafe, threatening me. Vanessa's lips thinned. He was upset, shocked by your decision. Surely you can understand that. What I understand, I said slowly, is that neither you nor Nathan had any interest in me being part of your lives until I had something you wanted. What I understand is that my grandchildren don't even know me, and you're using them as bargaining chips. That's not. It is, I interrupted, my voice firm but not unkind. And the saddest part is, if Nathan had come to me after the lottery win and simply said he was sorry, that he wanted me to know my grandchildren, that he regretted the years lost, I would have welcomed him with open arms. I would have shared everything I had with all of you. Vanessa stared at me, her composure cracking just slightly. It's not too late, she said. You could still change your mind about the trust. We could start fresh as a family. The trust is irrevocable, I reminded her. There is no changing my mind. There are ways, she insisted. Legal challenges. Claims of mental incompetency. Nathan has connections, resources. Threats now? I asked quietly. Is that why you came here, Vanessa? To threaten me? She straightened, affronted. I came to reason with you, to help you understand what's at stake. What's at stake, I said carefully, is whether my grandchildren grow up knowing that relationships matter more than money. Whether they learn that people have value beyond what they can provide materially. Easy lessons from someone who just won $100 million, she snapped, her polished veneer slipping. I didn't always have money, I reminded her. I raised Nathan in this very house, working 3 jobs after his father died. I know what it means to struggle, to sacrifice.
Do you?
Her eyes narrowed. You know nothing about me or my life. Just as you know nothing about mine. I replied evenly. Yet here you are, judging me, trying to manipulate me using children I've never been allowed to meet. Vanessa stood abruptly, gathering her designer purse. This was clearly a mistake. Nathan was right, you're impossible to reason with. I remained seated, looking up at her. Tell me, Vanessa, if there had been no lottery, would you ever have come here? Would you ever have allowed me to meet Emma and Michael? Her silence was answer enough. That's what I thought, I said softly. Please give my grandchildren my love, though they don't know who I am. She moved toward the door, then paused, turning back. This isn't over, Margaret. Nathan won't let it be. I know, I said simply. After she left, I sat alone in my living room, the untouched tea growing cold. Grandchildren I had never met, Emma and Michael, 8 and 6, reading and piano. Such small scraps of knowledge about children who shared my blood, my history, part of my very self. The pain was fresh, raw in a way Nathan's cruelty hadn't been. I had reconciled myself to his absence years ago, but these children, these innocent children who had been denied a grandmother through no fault of their own, their loss felt unbearable. I picked up my phone, dialing Elaine's number. Vanessa had just left, I told her when she answered. Nathan's wife. What did she want? Elaine asked, concern evident in her voice. The same thing Nathan wants. The money. She tried to use my grandchildren as leverage. Are you all right? I considered the question. Was I all right? No, not really. The wound had been reopened, salt poured generously into it. And yet, strangely, I felt more resolved than ever. I'm fine, I said, but I want to make a change to our plans. The next morning, I sat across from Elaine in her office as she reviewed the document I had asked her to prepare. You're certain about this? She asked, looking up from the papers. Completely, I nodded. The trust remains as established. The charitable beneficiaries stay the same. But I want to add this provision for my grandchildren. She studied me for a moment. It's generous. and thoughtful. They shouldn't suffer for their parents' choices, I said simply. And this way, no one can access the funds except the children themselves, and only when they're adults. Nathan and Vanessa won't be happy, she warned. This doesn't give them what they want. No, I agreed. It doesn't, but it gives the children what they deserve, a future they can shape themselves, independent of their parents' control. Elaine nodded slowly. I'll file the amendment today. As I left her office, my phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Opening it, I found a photo of two children, a girl with serious eyes behind glasses, a boy with a mischievous smile missing two front teeth. My grandchildren. Beneath the photo was a message. They could be in your life. Think about what you're giving up. Last chance to fix this.
V.
My hands trembled as I saved the photo. The first image I had ever seen of Emma and Michael up close. They were beautiful, perfect, and they were being used as pawns in their parents' game. With steady fingers, I typed a response. They were never mine to give up. You and Nathan saw to that long ago. The trust will provide for them when they're adults. That's my final word. I blocked the number before Vanessa could respond. 2 days later, a thick envelope arrived from Elaine's office. Confirmation that the trust amendment had been filed and accepted. My grandchildren would each receive $5 million upon turning 25, funds that could neither be accessed nor controlled by Nathan or Vanessa. I was in the kitchen, rereading the documents, when my doorbell rang. Through the newly installed security camera, I saw a man in a suit standing on my porch, holding what appeared to be legal papers. With a sigh, I opened the door. Margaret Collins? He asked, his expression professionally blank. Yes. You've been served, he said, handing me the envelope before turning and walking away without another word. Inside were the papers I had been expecting since my confrontation with Nathan, a lawsuit challenging the trust, claiming I had been mentally incompetent when I created it. The filing included affidavits from medical experts who had never met me, asserting that sudden wealth often triggered irrational behavior in elderly individuals. There were statements from distant relatives I barely knew, claiming I had shown signs of confusion and paranoia. The final document was the most shocking, a petition for emergency guardianship, seeking to have Nathan appointed as my legal guardian with full control over my person and any assets not yet transferred to the trust. My hands shook with anger as I called Elaine. They've done it, I told her, my voice tight. Nathan is trying to have me declared incompetent. He wants guardianship. We expected this, she reminded me gently. And we're prepared. The psychiatric evaluations, the documentation of your decision-making process, the witnesses to Nathan's abandonment and sudden reappearance. We have everything we need to fight this. He's claiming I'm paranoid and confused. I said, the irony not lost on me, that the money has made me irrational. Standard tactics, Elaine assured me. Don't worry, Margaret. We've seen this coming. We're ready. But despite her confidence, a cold knot of fear settled in my stomach. The legal system was complex, unpredictable. Nathan had money, connections, and an apparently limitless capacity for cruelty. What if he somehow won? What if I found myself declared incompetent, under the control of a son who saw me as nothing but a path to wealth? That night, I barely slept, my mind racing with worst-case scenarios. By morning, I had made a decision. I couldn't just defend myself. I needed to understand what I was truly facing. I needed to know more about the man my son had become. With trembling fingers, I dialed a number I had been given weeks ago but had never used, the private investigator Elaine had recommended, just in case. Jensen Investigations, a gruff voice answered. This is Margaret Collins, I said. I believe Elaine Hoffman mentioned me. Mrs. Collins, he acknowledged. Yes, Miss Hoffman said you might call. How can I help? I took a deep breath. I need information about my son, Nathan Collins. Everything you can find, his business dealings, his finances, his methods. This is about the trust situation, he asked. Yes, I confirmed. He's filed for guardianship over me, claiming I'm mentally incompetent. I need to know what I'm dealing with. Who he really is. Understood, Jensen said, his tone professional. I'll need some basic information to start. I provided what I knew. Nathan's address in Chicago, his firm's name, Vanessa's maiden name, the few details I had gleaned over years of distant observation. One more thing, I added as our conversation wound down. I'd like to know about my grandchildren too. Not for any legal purpose. Just, I'd like to know who they are, what their lives are like. There was a brief pause. I understand, Jensen said, his voice softening slightly. I'll see what I can find out. After hanging up, I sat in my kitchen, watching the morning light filter through the curtains. What was I doing? Hiring a private investigator to look into my own son's life. How had we come to this? But I knew the answer. We had come to this because Nathan had chosen money over family, status over love, greed over decency. And now I needed to protect myself from the stranger wearing my son's face. The next few days passed in a blur of legal consultations and preparations. Elaine filed our response to Nathan's lawsuit, including the psychiatric evaluations confirming my mental competence and affidavits from friends and colleagues attesting to my rationality and decision-making capacity. A court date was set for the preliminary hearing on the guardianship petition, just 2 weeks away. The speed was concerning. Nathan must have pulled strings to get the case fast-tracked, perhaps hoping to catch us unprepared. We'll be ready, Elaine assured me when I voiced my concerns. The judge assigned to the case is Harriet Monroe. She's fair, thorough, and not easily swayed by theatrics. But will she see through Nathan? I asked. He can be very convincing when he wants to be. That's why we have evidence, she reminded me. Facts don't lie, even when people do. On the 5th day after hiring Jensen, I received his first report, a thick envelope delivered by courier to my home rather than electronically, for security reasons. With a mix of dread and determination, I opened it at my kitchen table, spreading the contents before me. What I found made my blood run cold. Nathan's financial situation was far worse than I had imagined. His firm, while presenting an image of success, was deeply in debt. He had made a series of increasingly risky investments that had failed spectacularly. There were tax liens, credit card debts in the hundreds of thousands, a mortgage underwater, and most disturbing of all, evidence of funds missing from client accounts. Jensen's notes were clinical but clear. Nathan was likely facing financial ruin, possibly criminal charges, if the client fund discrepancies were discovered. The lottery money wasn't just a windfall to him. It was a lifeline, perhaps his only chance to avoid disgrace and possibly prison. Photos were included as well. Surveillance images of Nathan meeting with men Jensen had identified as known fixers in the Chicago financial world, individuals who specialized in making problems disappear for a price. The meetings looked tense, urgent. The final pages of the report focused on my grandchildren. Jensen had been discreet, gathering information from public records and observation rather than direct contact. Emma attended an exclusive private school where she excelled academically, but, according to a brief interview with a teacher, struggled socially. Michael was enrolled in an accelerated program for gifted children, his days packed with lessons and enrichment activities. Most revealing were the candid photos taken at a distance. Emma with her face buried in a book during recess, sitting alone while other children played. Michael at a piano recital, his expression serious beyond his years as his mother watched with visible intensity. They looked like children under pressure, burdened by expectations. My heart ached for them. I was still absorbing the report when my phone rang. It was Jensen. "Mrs. Collins," he said without preamble. "There's something you should know that came up after I sent the report." "What is it?" I asked, a sense of foreboding washing over me. "Your son has been making inquiries about hiring someone to do a job," he said carefully. "The kind of job that isn't strictly legal." My breath caught. "What kind of job?" "I don't have specifics," Jensen admitted. "But the individuals he's been talking to, they're not the kind of people legitimate businessmen associate with. These are people who solve problems permanently." The implication hung in the air, unspoken but clear. "Are you saying—" I couldn't finish the sentence. "I'm saying you should be careful," Jensen replied grimly. "Very careful. Don't go anywhere alone. Keep your security system armed at all times." and consider temporarily relocating to somewhere Nathan doesn't know about. My hands were shaking as I ended the call. My son, my own flesh and blood, was potentially plotting something dangerous, something criminal, against me. The thought was so horrifying, so alien, that part of me wanted to dismiss it outright. Surely there was a mistake. Surely Nathan, despite his flaws, wouldn't cross that line. But the evidence was mounting, and my instincts were screaming. The son I had raised was gone, replaced by a desperate man who saw me as nothing but an obstacle between him and the money he believed would save him. I called Elaine immediately, my voice steadier than I felt as I relayed Jensen's warning. "This changes things," she said, her tone grave. "I'm coming over. Don't open the door for anyone else." An hour later, Elaine sat across from me at my kitchen table, reviewing Jensen's report with a growing expression of concern. "This is worse than I anticipated," she admitted. "Nathan isn't just greedy, he's desperate. And desperate people are dangerous." "What do we do?" I asked. She closed the folder deliberately. "First, we contact the police. These threats, combined with Jensen's findings, are enough to request protection and possibly a restraining order. And then we go on the offensive," she said, her eyes meeting mine. "If Nathan wants a legal battle, we'll give him one. But we'll also make sure the authorities know exactly what kind of man they're dealing with." The next morning, Elaine and I sat in the office of Detective Sarah Rodriguez, laying out the evidence Jensen had gathered along with Nathan's threatening note and the context of his sudden reappearance after the lottery win. Detective Rodriguez, a compact woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense manner, listened without interruption, occasionally making notes in a small notebook. "To be clear," she said when we finished, "you believe your son may be planning to harm you to gain control of your assets?" "I don't want to believe it," I said honestly. "But the evidence suggests he's desperate enough to consider extreme measures." She nodded, reviewing Jensen's report again. "These financial troubles are significant. And these men he's been meeting with, they have known associations with illegal activities." "Can you help?" Elaine asked directly. "We can increase patrols in Mrs. Collins' neighborhood," Detective Rodriguez offered. "And based on this evidence, I believe we have grounds for a temporary restraining order. I'll also assign an officer to look more closely at Mr. Collins' activities here in town." It wasn't everything we'd hoped for, but it was a start. As we left the police station, I felt a strange mix of relief and profound sadness. My son's actions had driven me to seek police protection against him. How had we come to this? The answer came sooner than I expected. That evening, as I was preparing a simple dinner, my doorbell rang. The security camera showed a police officer, a young man in uniform, looking serious and official. Cautiously, I opened the door. "Mrs. Collins?" he asked. "I'm Officer Reyes. There's been an incident involving your son, Nathan Collins. May I come in?" My heart raced. "What kind of incident?" "It's complicated, ma'am. I'd rather discuss it inside." Something felt wrong. I remember Detective Rodriguez saying she would assign an officer to the case, but wouldn't they have called first? Wouldn't they have given a name? "Can I see your badge again, please?" I asked, stalling. As he reached for it, I noticed something, a flash of movement at the side of my house. A second person, trying to stay out of view of the security cameras. In that moment, instinct took over. I slammed the door shut, throwing the deadbolt just as the officer lunged forward. I ran to my security panel, hitting the panic button as a crash came from my back door. The alarm blared, deafening in the small house. Through the kitchen window, I saw a man in dark clothes fleeing across my backyard. At the front, the fake officer was also running, jumping into a car that screeched away from the curb. Within minutes, real police cars filled my street, lights flashing as officers secured the area. Detective Rodriguez arrived shortly after, her expression grim as she examined the damaged back door where someone had tried to force entry. "You were lucky," she told me as technicians dusted for fingerprints. "Your instincts saved you." "It was Nathan, wasn't it?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "He sent them." "We can't prove that yet," she said carefully. "But given the timing and circumstances, It seems likely this was connected to your situation. I nodded, a strange calm settling over me despite the chaos around me. I can't stay here. No, she agreed. You can't. Do you have somewhere safe to go? Somewhere Nathan wouldn't know about. I thought of my small circle of friends, my modest life. Where could I go that Nathan couldn't find me? I have a suggestion, Elaine said, having arrived shortly after the police. My sister owns a lake house about 2 hours from here. It's private, secure, and her name isn't connected to mine in any public records. You could stay there until the court hearing. Detective Rodriguez nodded approvingly. That sounds ideal. And I'll assign an officer to accompany you there and remain on site. Is that really necessary? I asked, the reality of my situation still seeming surreal. After tonight? Rodriguez raised an eyebrow. Yes, Mrs. Collins. It's necessary. As the police completed their investigation, I packed a small bag with essentials, clothes, medications, a few personal items. Among them, I carefully placed the photo of my grandchildren that Vanessa had sent, now printed and framed. Despite everything, they were innocent in this, and I held on to the hope that someday, somehow, I might know them. Before leaving, I stood in my living room one last time, looking at the home I had shared with Robert, where I had raised Nathan, where I had built a life of quiet dignity despite limited means. Now I was being forced to flee, driven out by the very child I had sacrificed everything for. Ready? Elaine asked gently from the doorway. I nodded, picking up my bag. Ready. As we walked to her car, a uniformed officer falling into step beside us, I felt a strange sense of resolve replacing my earlier fear. Nathan had escalated the battle, crossing lines I never imagined possible. But in doing so, he had revealed his true character not just to me, but to the authorities. The game had changed, and with it so had I. In Elaine's car, driving away from the home I might never see again, I made a decision. I had been reactive, defensive, always one step behind Nathan's machinations. It was time to change that dynamic. Elaine, I said quietly, I want to go to Chicago. She glanced at me, surprised. Chicago? That's the last place you should go right now. Nathan.
Nathan thinks I'm hiding, afraid, he interrupted.
And that's exactly what he wants. But I'm done hiding. I'm done being afraid. What exactly do you have in mind? She asked cautiously. I looked out at the darkness beyond the car window, my reflection staring back at me. Older, yes, but stronger than I had been in years. It's time I learned exactly who my son has become, I said. And it's time he learned who I am now. I'm through playing defense, Elaine. From this moment on, we're taking the fight to him. She was silent for a long moment, considering. This is risky, Margaret. Very risky. I know, I nodded. But sometimes the safest place to be is right where your enemy least expects you. As we drove through the night, the plan began to take shape in my mind. Nathan thought he was facing a helpless old woman, easy to intimidate, easy to control. He was about to discover just how wrong he was. The battle for my future, and perhaps for my very life, had truly begun. Chicago in autumn was nothing like I remembered. The last time I'd visited was 20 years ago, when Nathan graduated from college. Back then, the city had intimidated me with its towering buildings and hurried crowds. I'd felt out of place in my department store dress, clutching my purse as students in designer clothes streamed past with their confident parents. Now, gazing out the window of my suite at the Langham Hotel, I felt strangely calm. The city spread below me, a glittering expanse of lights and possibility. I was no longer that uncertain woman, trying desperately not to embarrass her ambitious son. I was Margaret Collins, and I was done being afraid. Mrs. Collins? Officer Dawson knocked lightly at the connecting door to the adjoining room. Young, serious, and competent, he had been assigned as my protection detail after the break-in attempt. Miss Hoffman is here. Thank you, I said, smoothing down my new dress, a simple but elegant navy blue sheath that Elaine had insisted I buy for our time in Chicago. Send her in. Elaine entered, immaculate as always in a tailored pantsuit, carrying a leather portfolio. Her eyebrows rose slightly at my appearance. "You look different," she observed, setting her portfolio on the coffee table. I touched my newly styled hair self-consciously. The hotel salon had worked wonders, transforming my plain bob into something softer, more flattering. "Is it too much?" "Not at all," she smiled. "It's perfect for what we're doing. You look confident, poised. Exactly what we want." What we were doing. Even now, it seemed surreal, the plan we had formulated during that late-night drive. Not hiding from Nathan, but confronting him on his own turf. Not just defending myself in court, but taking the battle to him directly. "Jensen's team is in position," Elaine continued, opening her portfolio to reveal photographs, documents, and a detailed timeline. "Nathan's firm is on the 17th floor of the Weston Tower. He arrives each morning between 8:15 and 8:30, always through the main entrance. His assistant, a woman named Diane Mercer, arrives 30 minutes earlier to prepare his schedule and coffee." I studied the surveillance photos, my son striding into the gleaming office building, his expression stern, shoulders tense. Even in these casual snapshots, I could see the strain on his face, the barely contained desperation beneath his polished exterior. "What about security?" I asked. "Standard for a downtown office building," Elaine replied. "ID cards for employees, sign-in for visitors. Nothing we can't handle." She slid a small envelope across the table. "Your credentials." Jensen's contact created them last night. Inside was a business card and ID badge identifying me as Margaret Whitmore, representative of the Heartland Foundation, a real charitable organization that partnered with financial firms for philanthropic initiatives. "Will this really work?" I asked, turning the badge over in my hand. Jensen's contact confirmed that Diane Mercer has been instructed to welcome all potential clients, especially those representing foundations or endowments, Elaine explained. "Nathan's desperate for new business. She won't turn you away." I nodded slowly, the reality of what we were about to do settling over me. Tomorrow morning, I would walk into my son's office under a false identity. I would face him not as his mother, but as a potential client with resources he desperately needed. And in doing so, I would gather the evidence we needed to protect me, and perhaps, ultimately, to save him from himself. "What if he recognizes me immediately?" I asked, the question that had been nagging at me since we'd formulated this plan. Elaine's expression softened. "Margaret, when was the last time Nathan really looked at you? I mean, truly saw you as you are now, not as the mother he left behind 15 years ago." I considered this. Even at the cafe confrontation, Nathan had barely glanced at me, too consumed with his own rage and entitlement to register my appearance. And now, with the new clothes, the styled hair, the subtle makeup, and most importantly, the confidence I now carried, would he see past the disguise to the mother he had dismissed as irrelevant? "You're right," I conceded. "He sees what he expects to see. And he doesn't expect to see me walking into his office as a potential client." "Exactly," Elaine nodded. "Now let's go over the plan once more." As night fell over Chicago, we rehearsed every detail. The questions I would ask, the documents I would request to review, the hidden recording device disguised as a simple brooch on my lapel. By midnight, I felt as prepared as I could be, though my heart raced at the thought of what awaited me in the morning. "Try to get some sleep," Elaine advised as she gathered her materials. "Tomorrow will be challenging." After she left, I stood by the window again, watching the city lights below. Somewhere out there was my son, perhaps plotting his next move against me. Did he know I had fled my home? Was he searching for me, frustrated by my disappearance? Or was he confident that his legal maneuvers would eventually succeed, giving him control over both me and the money he coveted? I thought of the grandson and granddaughter I had never met. Emma with her serious eyes. Michael with his missing front teeth. What were they doing tonight? Did they sense the tension in their home, the desperation driving their father's actions? Were they, too, pawns in Nathan's game? Sleep eluded me for hours, my mind racing with possibilities, fears, and a strange sort of anticipation. When I finally drifted off, my dreams were a jumble of past and present. Nathan as a child, laughing as he raced through a sprinkler in our backyard. Nathan, as I had last seen him, his face contorted with rage as he realized the money had slipped through his fingers. Morning came too quickly. I rose before dawn, preparing myself with deliberate care. The navy dress, pearl earrings, not my usual costume jewelry, but real ones I had purchased yesterday, a small indulgence that felt like armor. Light makeup that subtly enhanced my features without appearing obvious. The special brooch containing the recording device, pinned carefully to my lapel. When I looked in the mirror, a stranger stared back at me, not the Margaret Collins who had lived a quiet life of modest contentment, but a woman of confidence and purpose. A woman who could walk into a prestigious financial firm and be taken seriously. Officer Dawson drove me to the Weston Tower, pulling up to the curb precisely at 8:05 a.m. "I'll be right here," he promised, his young face serious. "If anything feels wrong, anything at all, you call me immediately." I nodded, clutching my new leather portfolio. Another purchase from yesterday, containing carefully selected documents about the fictional endowment I was supposedly representing. The Weston Tower soared above me, all glass and steel reaching toward the morning sky. I took a deep breath and walked through the revolving doors into the marble-floored lobby. Security was exactly as Jensen had described. I presented my fake ID, signed the visitor log as Margaret Whitmore, and was directed to the elevator bank. Minutes later, I stepped onto the 17th floor, into a reception area designed to impress: sleek furniture, abstract art, and a magnificent view of the Chicago skyline. Behind a curved desk sat a woman in her 30s, impeccably dressed, with a telephone headset and an air of efficient professionalism. Diane Mercer, Nathan's assistant. "Good morning," I said, approaching with a confidence I didn't entirely feel. "I'm Margaret Whitmore from the Heartland Foundation. I was hoping to speak with Nathan Collins about potential investment opportunities for our endowment." Diane's expression brightened immediately. "Ms. Whitmore, what a pleasant surprise. Do you have an appointment?" "I'm afraid not," I admitted with an apologetic smile. "I'm only in Chicago for the day, and a colleague recommended Mr. Collins very highly. I was hoping he might have a few minutes to spare." She hesitated, glancing at her computer screen. "Mr. Collins has a rather full schedule today." "I understand completely," I said, preparing to implement our backup plan. "Perhaps another time." "Wait," she said quickly, clearly reluctant to turn away a potential client. "Let me check with him. The Heartland Foundation, you said? What size endowment are we discussing?" "Approximately $75 million, I replied, using the figure Elaine and I had agreed upon, large enough to capture interest, but not so large as to seem suspicious. Diane's eyes widened slightly. "Please have a seat. I'll speak with Mr. Collins right away." I settled into one of the sleek visitor chairs, my heart pounding so loudly I was certain Diane could hear it across the reception area. She spoke quietly into her headset, her expression professional but her eyes darting to me occasionally. After what seemed an eternity, but was probably less than a minute, she smiled brightly. "Mr. Collins can see you now, Ms. Whitmore. Right this way, please." She led me down a hallway lined with glass-walled offices to a corner suite at the end. Through the glass, I could see him, my son, standing behind his desk, straightening his tie as he prepared to meet a potential client. He looked thinner than at our cafe confrontation, the strain of recent weeks evident in the tightness around his eyes, the slight hollowness of his cheeks. "Mr. Collins," Diane announced, opening the door. "This is Margaret Whitmore from the Heartland Foundation." Nathan turned, a practiced smile already in place, the smile of a financial advisor eager to impress, to secure new business. His eyes met mine, and for a heartbeat, I was certain he would recognize me instantly, that the charade would collapse before it had truly begun. But there was no flash of recognition, no sudden anger or shock. Just the polite interest of a businessman greeting a potential client. "Ms. Whitmore," he said, extending his hand. "A pleasure to meet you. Please come in." I stepped into his office, taking his hand briefly. The first physical contact we had shared in 15 years. If he noticed my slight tremor, he gave no sign. Thank you for making time on such short notice, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. I appreciate your flexibility. For the Heartland Foundation? Of course, he replied smoothly, gesturing toward a chair across from his desk. Diane, could you bring us some coffee? And hold my calls for the next 30 minutes. As Diane left, closing the door behind her, I took the opportunity to study my son's office. Expensive furniture, framed credentials on the wall, a single family photo on his desk, Nathan, Vanessa, and the children, all smiling perfectly for the camera. A picture-perfect family with no hint of the financial desperation Jensen had uncovered. So, Nathan said, settling into his chair with practiced ease, Diane mentioned you're looking at investment opportunities for your endowment. Approximately $75 million. Is that correct? Yes, I confirmed, opening my portfolio to remove the materials Elaine had prepared. We're considering diversifying our current investments. A colleague spoke very highly of your work. I'm flattered, he smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. May I ask which colleague? James Harrington, I replied, using the name of a real financial advisor who, according to Jensen's research, had minimal contact with Nathan, enough to make the reference plausible but not close enough to raise suspicion. Nathan nodded, though a flicker of uncertainty crossed his face. Jim Harrington. Of course. From the Boston conference last year, I believe. It was a fishing expedition. He clearly didn't recall meeting anyone by that name but was too proud to admit it. I believe so, I said vaguely. In any case, I was hoping you might tell me more about your approach to endowment management. Our board is particularly interested in long-term growth with moderate risk. For the next 20 minutes, I listened as Nathan outlined his investment philosophy, detailing strategies and opportunities with smooth confidence. If I hadn't seen Jensen's report on his failing finances, I would have been completely convinced by his performance. He was good, articulate, knowledgeable, projecting an air of success and stability that belied his desperate reality. As he spoke, I asked carefully crafted questions designed to elicit specific information about his firm's practices, questions that, according to Elaine, might lead him to reveal discrepancies or improprieties if they existed. And your client funds, I inquired casually. How are they typically managed? Separate accounts for each client, I assume. A nearly imperceptible tension appeared around his eyes. Of course. Each client has dedicated accounts, though we pool resources for certain investments to maximize returns. Interesting, I nodded. And the oversight for those pooled investments? How do you maintain transparency? We provide detailed quarterly reports, he said, the tension now evident in his slightly too tight smile. Our compliance department is extremely thorough. Compliance department. According to Jensen, Nathan's firm had exactly one compliance officer, a recent graduate who spent most of his time on administrative tasks rather than actual oversight. That's reassuring, I said. Would it be possible to see a sample of those reports? Just to get a sense of the format and detail level. His smile froze for a fraction of a second before he recovered. Certainly. Though client information would be redacted, of course. Of course, I agreed. He turned to his computer, clicking through files with a slight frown. I'll have Diane prepare some samples for you to take with you. Now, about your foundation's specific needs. He was deflecting, steering the conversation away from the documentation I had requested. Another red flag. For the next 10 minutes, I continued my questioning, noting each slight hesitation, each careful evasion. The recording device in my brooch captured it all, not just his words, but the telling pauses, the subtle shifts in tone that might indicate deception. As our meeting neared its scheduled end, I decided to take a calculated risk. One more question, if you don't mind. Recent market volatility has made our board somewhat cautious. Have any of your clients expressed concerns about their investments in the past year? Nathan's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. All investors have concerns during volatile periods. That's natural. Our job is to provide reassurance based on solid strategy and historical performance. Of course, I nodded. Though I did hear something concerning recently about a firm in this building. Something about irregularities in client accounts. I can't recall the details, but it made our board nervous about all firms in this sector. His face paled slightly, his knuckles whitening as he gripped his pen. I haven't heard anything of the sort. The financial community in Chicago is quite tight-knit. Rumors like that would circulate quickly. I'm sure it was nothing, I said with a dismissive wave. Probably just boardroom gossip. He recovered quickly, his professional mask sliding back into place. The financial industry is unfortunately prone to rumor. It's one reason we pride ourselves on transparency and communication with our clients. Our meeting concluded with practiced pleasantries. Nathan promised to have his team prepare a proposal for the Heartland Foundation's endowment, and I promised to bring it to my fictional board for consideration. As I stood to leave, something unexpected happened. Nathan's eyes narrowed slightly as he looked at me, a flicker of something, not quite recognition, but perhaps a vague familiarity, crossing his face. "Have we met before, Ms. Whitmore?" he asked, his head tilting slightly. "Something about you seems familiar." My heart nearly stopped, but years of mothering a challenging child had taught me to keep my expression neutral under pressure. "I don't believe so, Mr. Collins. I've been with the Heartland Foundation for only 3 years, and primarily in our Milwaukee office." He continued studying me for an uncomfortable moment, then shook his head. "My mistake. You just reminded me of someone for a moment." As Diane escorted me back to the reception area, I struggled to keep my breathing even, my steps measured. I had sat across from my own son, looked into his eyes, and he had not recognized me. The disguise had worked, but more than that, Nathan truly didn't see me. The mother he had once known had become invisible to him, replaced by his own narrow perception of who I was and what I represented. The realization was both painful and liberating. Outside the Weston Tower, Officer Dawson waited as promised, relief evident on his face as I approached the car. "Everything go okay?" he asked as he opened the door for me. "Better than expected," I replied, sliding into the back seat. He didn't recognize me at all. Back at the hotel, Elaine and Jensen were waiting, eager to hear about the meeting. I recounted every detail while Jensen carefully removed the recording device from my brooch, downloading its contents to his laptop. "He's definitely hiding something," Jensen confirmed as he reviewed the audio. "Those hesitations when you asked about client accounts and reporting, classic signs of deception. But it's not enough for legal action," Elaine cautioned. "We need more concrete evidence." "What's the next step?" I asked, exhaustion suddenly washing over me as the adrenaline of the morning faded. Jensen and Elaine exchanged glances. "We've identified a potential ally," Jensen said carefully. "Someone inside Nathan's firm who might be willing to provide information." "Who?" I asked. "A junior associate named Marcus Wells," he explained. "According to my sources, he's become increasingly uncomfortable with certain practices at the firm. He's been making discreet inquiries about whistleblower protections." "Can we trust him?" I asked. "I've vetted him thoroughly," Jensen assured me. "He appears to be genuinely concerned about potential illegalities. He doesn't know your connection to Nathan, of course. Just that we're investigating possible financial improprieties." "When can we meet him?" "Tonight," Elaine said. "He's agreed to meet us at a restaurant in Lincoln Park, neutral territory, public enough to be safe, but private enough for conversation." I nodded, my mind racing with possibilities. If this Marcus Wells had evidence of Nathan's financial misconduct, it could change everything. Not just my legal battle against Nathan's guardianship petition, but potentially exposing him to criminal charges. The thought brought me no joy. Despite everything, the idea of my son facing prosecution sickened me. He was still my child, the boy I had raised, even if that boy was now buried beneath layers of greed and desperation. "There's something else," Jensen said, interrupting my thoughts. "While you were at Nathan's office, I had a team member follow up on another lead." He pulled a folder from his briefcase. "We've located Nathan and Vanessa's nanny, a woman named Rosa Martinez. She left their employment about 6 months ago." "And," I prompted, my heart racing at the mention of someone connected to my grandchildren. "And she's willing to talk to you," Jensen said simply. "About the children. About what she observed in that household." Tears sprang to my eyes unexpectedly. She knows my grandchildren? Jensen nodded. She cared for them for nearly 4 years. Says she has concerns. Concerns. The word hung in the air, ominous and vague. When can I meet her? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper.
Tomorrow morning, he replied.
She agreed to come to the hotel. I've arranged for a conference room downstairs. Private, secure. I nodded, emotion threatening to overwhelm me. After all these years, I would finally hear about my grandchildren from someone who had known them, cared for them, witnessed their daily lives. There's one more development, Elaine said, her expression grave. The court date for Nathan's guardianship petition has been moved up. The judge agreed to an expedited hearing at Nathan's request. How soon? I asked, alarm rising. 3 days from now. Here in Chicago. 3 days? I echoed. That's hardly enough time to prepare. That's exactly why Nathan pushed for it, she said grimly. He's hoping to catch us off guard, to force a ruling before we can gather all our evidence. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. Then we have 3 days to build our case. 3 days to expose the truth about Nathan's finances, his motives, his methods. And 3 days to decide what kind of justice you're seeking, Elaine added softly. Because if Marcus Wells has what I think he has, and if we use it, Nathan could face more than just losing his guardianship petition. He could face criminal charges, Margaret. Are you prepared for that? The question struck me like a physical blow. Was I prepared to see my only child prosecuted? To be the instrument of his downfall? The mother in me recoiled at the thought. But the woman who had been threatened, manipulated, nearly attacked in her own home, that woman recognized the necessity of protection, of justice. I don't know, I admitted. I honestly don't know. That night, Officer Dawson drove us to a small Italian restaurant in Lincoln Park where Marcus Wells was waiting. He was younger than I expected, early 30s perhaps, with an earnest face and nervous manner. He kept glancing toward the door as we were seated at a quiet corner table. Thank you for meeting us, Mr. Wells, Elaine began after introductions were made. I had been introduced simply as Mrs. Collins, with no explanation of my relationship to Nathan. I'm taking a significant risk being here, he said quietly, his fingers drumming anxiously on the tablecloth. If Mr. Collins found out, your identity will be protected, Jensen assured him. We understand the professional and personal risk you're taking. Marcus nodded, though he looked far from reassured. I never wanted to be in this position. When I joined the firm 3 years ago, it had a solid reputation. But things changed. About 18 months ago, Mr. Collins began making increasingly risky investments. When they didn't pay off, he started moving money. Moving money? Elaine prompted. Marcus lowered his voice further. Using funds from new clients to cover losses for existing ones. Classic Ponzi scheme structure, though I don't think he sees it that way. He tells himself it's temporary, that the next big investment will turn everything around. Do you have documentation of these transfers? Jensen asked. Marcus reached into his jacket, withdrawing a small USB drive which he slid across the table. Everything I could safely download without triggering security alerts. Account statements, transfer records, internal memos about reallocation strategies. His mouth twisted on the last words. It's all there. Jensen pocketed the drive discreetly. This is extremely helpful, Mr. Wells. There's more, Marcus continued, his expression growing more troubled. About 2 months ago, Mr. Collins began liquidating personal assets. His vacation home in Michigan, his wife's jewelry, even his children's college funds. My heart clenched at this last revelation. Nathan had raided his own children's future to cover his financial misdeeds. How bad is it? I asked, speaking for the first time. His financial situation, I mean. Marcus looked at me directly. Catastrophic. The firm is essentially insolvent. Client funds are missing. Regulatory filing deadlines have been missed. It's only a matter of time before it all collapses. And his clients? Elaine asked. Do they suspect anything? Some have begun asking questions, Marcus confirmed. Requesting withdrawals that get delayed with various excuses. Mr. Collins has become desperate, erratic. Last week, I overheard him on the phone discussing something about a trust, about securing his mother's assets. He glanced at me curiously. That's actually what prompted me to contact Mr. Jensen. It sounded like elder financial abuse on top of everything else. I exchanged glances with Elaine and Jensen. Marcus had no idea who I was or how directly his information affected me. Mr. Wells, Elaine said carefully, the information you've provided may be used in legal proceedings. Would you be willing to testify if necessary? He paled visibly. I hadn't considered that. I thought providing the documentation would be enough. It may be, she assured him, but if it comes to testimony, would you be willing? He was silent for a long moment, internal conflict evident on his face. If it means stopping what's happening at the firm, yes, I would testify. But I'd need guarantees about whistleblower protection, immunity from prosecution for my role, however unwitting. We can arrange that, Elaine promised. As we left the restaurant, Marcus headed in the opposite direction, his shoulders hunched as if carrying a physical burden. I watched him disappear around a corner. This young man whose conscience had driven him to risk his career, perhaps even his safety. Will he be all right? I asked Jensen as we walked to the car. I've arranged protection for him as well, he assured me. Discreet but effective. Back at the hotel, Jensen connected the USB drive to his laptop, and the three of us spent hours reviewing the documents Marcus had provided. The evidence was damning. Clear documentation of improper fund transfers, falsified reports to clients, desperate attempts to cover mounting losses. This is enough, Elaine said finally, rubbing her tired eyes. More than enough to counter Nathan's guardianship petition. The judge will see his true motive clearly. And enough for criminal charges? I asked, the question that had been weighing on me throughout the evening. She nodded solemnly. Yes. Securities fraud at minimum. Possibly wire fraud, mail fraud if these falsified statements were sent to clients. These are serious federal offenses, Margaret. I stood, walking to the window to gaze out at the Chicago night. Somewhere out there, my son was perhaps lying awake, planning his next move against me, unaware that his deceptions were unraveling, that his desperate gambit was about to collapse. What do you want to do? Elaine asked softly, coming to stand beside me. I don't know yet, I admitted. Part of me wants justice, real justice, not just protecting myself from his schemes. But another part. I trailed off, emotion tightening my throat. He's still your son, she finished for me. Yes, I whispered. Despite everything, he's still my son. She placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. You don't have to decide tonight. We'll meet with Rosa tomorrow. Then we'll discuss all options before the hearing. That night, sleep eluded me once again. I lay awake, thinking of Nathan as a child, his first steps, his first words, the way he had once looked at me with complete trust and love. Where had that little boy gone? How had he become the desperate, dishonest man revealed in Marcus's documents? Had I failed him somehow? Had Robert's death left a wound too deep to heal? Or had the seeds of Nathan's flaws been there all along, waiting for circumstance to nurture them into full bloom? Morning came with no answers, only the knowledge that today I would learn about my grandchildren from someone who had known them intimately. The anticipation was both sweet and painful. Rosa Martinez arrived at the hotel precisely at 10, a petite woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a gentle manner. In the private conference room Jensen had arranged, she greeted me with unexpected warmth. Mrs. Collins, she said, taking my hands in hers. I have wanted to meet you for so long. Surprised, I asked, You knew about me? She nodded, sadness in her eyes. The children have a photograph. They keep it hidden from their parents. It is of a younger you, with Mr. Nathan when he was a boy. They found it in a box in the attic when they were playing. Tears sprang to my eyes. They know who I am? They know they have a grandmother they have never met, she said carefully. They ask questions sometimes, but Mr. Nathan and Mrs. Vanessa? She shook her head disapprovingly. They say cruel things, that you abandoned the family, that you didn't want them. The injustice of it burned like fire. That's not true, I said, my voice breaking. Nathan cut me out of his life. He told me not to contact him. I believed it was something like this, Rosa nodded. The story they told never felt right to me. The children sense it too, especially Emma. She is very perceptive, that one. Tell me about them, I urged, hungry for any detail about these children I had never known. Please tell me everything. For the next hour, Rosa shared stories of my grandchildren, Emma's remarkable intelligence, her love of books, her quiet determination, Michael's musical talent, his mischievous smile, his tender heart. She showed me photos on her phone, casual snapshots taken during outings to the park, birthday celebrations, quiet moments at home that captured the essence of the children in a way the formal portrait in Nathan's office never could. But woven through these loving observations were troubling details, the enormous pressure placed on both children to excel, to project the perfect image, to never disappoint. Emma's anxiety when she received anything less than perfect marks. Michael's tears when he missed notes during piano practice. The long hours both parents worked, leaving the children primarily in Rosa's care. And then there were the arguments, she continued, her expression darkening. At first, they were careful, waiting until the children were asleep. But in recent months, they became careless. Shouting about money, about investments gone wrong, about keeping up appearances. The financial problems, I murmured. She nodded. Mrs. Vanessa would cry about selling her jewelry. Mr. Nathan would rage about ungrateful clients. It was no environment for children. Her eyes met mine directly. It is why I left. I could not protect them anymore, and it broke my heart. Are they in danger? I asked, fear clutching at my throat. My grandchildren, are they safe? Rosa considered the question carefully. Not in danger of physical harm, no. Mr. Nathan and Mrs. Vanessa love the children in their way. But they are in danger of growing up believing that appearance matters more than substance. That money equals worth. That failure is unforgivable. She squeezed my hand. They need someone to show them another way to be. Someone like me was the unspoken suggestion. A grandmother who could offer different values, a different perspective, a counterbalance to the pressures and expectations crushing these young spirits. There is something else you should know, Rosa said hesitantly. Just before I left, I overheard Mr. Nathan on the phone. He was angry, shouting about needing money urgently. He mentioned using the children somehow, taking them somewhere to make her see reason. I believe he was talking about you, Mrs. Collins. A chill ran through me. Using the children how? I don't know, she admitted. But it worried me greatly. Mr. Nathan, when he is desperate, he is not the man he pretends to be. After Rosa left, promising to stay in touch, I sat alone in the conference room, overwhelmed by everything I had learned. My grandchildren knew of my existence, but had been told I had abandoned them. They were living in a household fracturing under financial pressure, with parents too focused on appearances and status to see the damage being done. And now, Nathan might be planning to use them somehow against me, perhaps bringing them to the guardianship hearing as emotional leverage, or worse, threatening their well-being if I didn't cooperate with his demands. When Elaine and Jensen arrived for our scheduled meeting, they found me still sitting there, tears streaming down my face.
Margaret.
Elaine asked, alarmed. What happened? Through broken sobs, I related what Rosa had told me, the good and the bad, the beautiful and the troubling. When I finished, recounting Rosa's overheard conversation about Nathan using the children, Jensen's expression darkened. This changes things, he said grimly. If Nathan is planning to use the children as pawns, we need to be prepared.
How?
I asked, wiping away tears. How do we protect them when I have no legal standing in their lives? We use what we have, Elaine said firmly. The evidence of Nathan's financial crimes, his deteriorating stability, the testimony of people like Rosa and Marcus. We build a case not just against his guardianship petition, but potentially for a counter-petition. Counter-petition? I echoed. For custody of your grandchildren, she clarified. Or, at least visitation rights. It would be challenging given the circumstances, but not impossible. especially if Nathan's legal situation deteriorates to the point where both he and Vanessa are implicated in financial crimes. The idea was simultaneously thrilling and terrifying. My grandchildren living with me, having the chance to know them, to love them openly, to show them that worth wasn't measured by achievement or status. Is that really possible? I asked, hardly daring to hope. It's a long shot, Elaine admitted. But given what we now know, it might be worth pursuing. The question is, are you willing to use the evidence of Nathan's crimes to potentially gain custody of your grandchildren? Because those two things are likely linked now. I closed my eyes, the choice before me impossibly difficult. To protect myself and potentially save my grandchildren, I would need to expose Nathan's crimes that could send him to prison. My son behind bars. My grandchildren losing their father to the justice system. Yet the alternative seemed equally unbearable. Nathan continuing his desperate spiral, dragging his children deeper into a world of false appearances and moral compromise. My grandchildren growing up never knowing the truth about their grandmother, never experiencing unconditional love free from expectation and performance. I need time to think, I said finally, to decide what kind of justice I'm seeking, what kind of future I want for all of us. The hearing is in 2 days. Elaine reminded me gently. We need to prepare our strategy. I know, I nodded. Give me until tomorrow morning. I'll have my decision then. That night, alone in my hotel room, I spread out the photos Rosa had shared with me, Emma with her serious eyes behind glasses, Michael at the piano, both children playing in a park, their faces alight with momentary joy. I stared at those photographs for hours, these precious glimpses of lives that should have been intertwined with mine. My grandchildren, my flesh and blood, strangers who had been taught I didn't want them. By midnight, my decision was made. I picked up my phone and texted Elaine. Meeting at 7 a.m. I know what I need to do. Sleep came fitfully, dreams of courtrooms and children's faces blending with memories of Nathan as a boy, his hand trustingly in mine as we crossed streets, his voice calling, Mom, with excitement rather than contempt. Morning arrived with a clarity I hadn't felt in weeks. When Elaine and Jensen joined me in my suite, they found me dressed and ready, a calm determination replacing yesterday's tears. You've decided, Elaine said, observing my expression as she accepted the coffee I offered. Yes, I confirmed, taking a seat across from them. I want to use everything we have, the financial evidence, Rosa's testimony, Marcus's documents. All of it. Jensen nodded, but Elaine studied me carefully. You understand what this means for Nathan? Potential criminal charges, possible imprisonment. I understand, I said quietly. And believe me, the thought of my son in prison brings me no joy. But this isn't just about Nathan anymore, or even about me. It's about Emma and Michael. I picked up the photographs, touching the children's faces gently. These children deserve better than to be raised in a house of lies and desperation. They deserve to know their grandmother, to know that worth isn't measured by achievements or appearances. And they deserve a father who understands consequences, who takes responsibility for his actions. Even if that means he's absent from their lives for a time? Elaine asked, not challenging, but ensuring I had considered all implications. I believe, I said slowly, that the Nathan who might emerge from facing real consequences could be a better father than the desperate man he's become. And during whatever separation might occur, I would be there for Emma and Michael. Not to replace their parents, but to provide stability, love, and different values than those they've been taught. Jensen leaned forward. You're talking about seeking custody. Partial custody, at minimum, I nodded. Visitation rights at the very least. These children need to know the truth, that they have a grandmother who has always wanted to know them, who has always loved them even from a distance. It won't be easy, Elaine cautioned. Even with evidence of Nathan's financial crimes, family courts are reluctant to remove children from their parents without clear evidence of abuse or neglect. Which is why we need more than just the financial evidence, I said firmly. We need to show a pattern of emotional manipulation, of using the children as pawns. Rosa's testimony helps, but we need more. Jensen's expression turned thoughtful. There might be a way, he said carefully. A somewhat unorthodox approach, but potentially effective. I'm listening, I said. Nathan believes you're hiding, Jensen explained. That you're afraid, on the defensive. What if we change that narrative completely? What if, instead of waiting for the guardianship hearing, you confront him directly, on your terms, in a controlled environment? Elaine frowned. That sounds potentially dangerous. Not with proper preparation and security, Jensen countered. And not if we create circumstances where Nathan reveals his true nature, his true intentions regarding both Margaret and the children. You're talking about a sting operation, Elaine realized. Recording Nathan making threats or admissions. Exactly, Jensen nodded. Similar to what we did at his office, but more direct. No pretense of being a potential client. Just Margaret, confronting her son about his actions, his plans for the children. In a public place? I asked, considering the possibility. Semi-public, Jensen suggested. Somewhere with enough privacy for a real conversation, but enough witnesses and security that you'd be safe. A restaurant, perhaps? Or a hotel lobby? And if he refuses to meet? Elaine questioned. We make it worth his while, I said slowly, the plan taking shape in my mind. We offer what he wants most, a discussion about the trust, about a potential compromise. He's desperate enough that he'll come. It's risky, Elaine warned. If he suspects it's a trap. He won't, I said with quiet confidence. Because he still sees me as the mother he could intimidate and dismiss. He has no idea who I've become. By noon, the plan was set. I would contact Nathan, suggesting a meeting to discuss a potential settlement regarding the trust. The location would be the Garden Restaurant at the Four Seasons, public enough for safety, private enough for conversation. Jensen would arrange for discreet recording equipment and security personnel positioned nearby. Officer Dawson would be present, but not visible, ready to intervene if necessary. With hands that trembled only slightly, I composed a text message to Nathan's cell phone. Nathan, I think it's time we spoke directly, without lawyers. I'm prepared to discuss a potential compromise regarding the trust. Four Seasons Garden Restaurant, 6 p.m. today. Please come alone. Mom. His response came within minutes. About time you saw reason. I'll be there. Just 7 words, but they revealed so much. The arrogance, the assumption that my offer meant capitulation, the lack of any warmth or familial connection. This was a business transaction to him, nothing more. He's coming, I told Elaine and Jensen, showing them the message. And he thinks he's won already. Perfect, Jensen nodded approvingly. That overconfidence works in our favor. Now, let's prepare you for every possible scenario. For the next several hours, we rehearsed, anticipating Nathan's likely arguments, practicing how I would respond, identifying triggers that might provoke revealing statements. Jensen fitted me with a recording device more sophisticated than the brooch I had worn to Nathan's office, this one virtually undetectable in the button of my jacket. Remember, he coached, the goal isn't to provoke anger for its own sake. It's to get him to reveal his true intentions regarding both you and the children. Ask direct questions about his plans. Press him on contradictions. But maintain your composure. You want him to be the one who loses control. As evening approached, I prepared with deliberate care, choosing clothes that made me feel confident and strong, a tailored pantsuit in deep burgundy, simple gold jewelry, comfortable but elegant shoes I could walk or even run in if necessary. Looking in the mirror, I barely recognized myself, not just in appearance, but in the steady gaze that met my reflection. The frightened, uncertain woman who had once accepted Nathan's cruel dismissal was gone. Officer Dawson drove me to the Four Seasons, parking where he could observe the restaurant entrance. I'll be right here, he promised. And Jensen's team is already in position. The Garden Restaurant was beautiful, an oasis of greenery and soft lighting in the midst of the city. I arrived 15 minutes early, selecting a table near the center, visible to Jensen's security team, but with enough privacy for conversation. The maitre d', discreetly informed of the situation, ensured no other guests were seated in the immediate vicinity. At precisely 6 p.m., Nathan arrived. He looked more polished than at his office, dressed in an expensive suit, his expression one of barely concealed triumph as he spotted me. The maitre d' led him to my table, where I remained seated, my hands folded calmly before me. "Mother," he said, taking the seat across from me without waiting for an invitation. "You're looking different." His eyes narrowed slightly, taking in my appearance with a hint of confusion. "People change, Nathan," I replied evenly. "Thank you for coming." He signaled impatiently for a server, ordering scotch without glancing at the menu. I requested water, needing to keep my mind absolutely clear. "So," he said once the server departed, leaning back with the confidence of someone who believes they've already won, "you've finally decided to be reasonable. About time." "I've decided we should talk directly," I corrected. "About what's happening and why." His smile was tight, impatient. "What's happening is simple. You've been making irrational decisions with money you don't need and can't properly manage. I'm seeking guardianship to protect both you and the family's interests." "The family's interests," I repeated. "You mean your interests, don't you, Nathan?" His expression hardened. "Don't start with that. You have no idea what pressures I'm under, what responsibilities I have." "Actually, I do," I said calmly. "I know about the failed investments, the misappropriated client funds, the liquidated assets, including your children's college accounts." The color drained from his face, replaced almost immediately by a flush of anger. "You've been investigating me," he hissed, leaning forward. "Having me followed?" "I needed to understand what I was dealing with," I replied. "Just as you investigated me to build your guardianship case." The server returned with our drinks. Nathan took his scotch with a slightly trembling hand, drinking half of it in one swallow. I sipped my water, watching him over the rim of the glass. "Whatever you think you know," he said once the server departed, "you can't prove anything. And it's irrelevant to the guardianship petition. The fact that you're hiring investigators to spy on your own son only proves you're becoming paranoid." "Is that what you'll tell the judge?" I asked. "That hiring security after someone sent fake police officers to break into my home is paranoia?" His eyes widened slightly, genuine surprise, or an excellent performance. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't you?" I pressed. "Just as you don't know about the threatening note you left under my door? Or the men you met with in Chicago who specialize in permanent solutions to problems?" "This is absurd," he scoffed, but his knuckles were white around his glass. "You've constructed some elaborate conspiracy theory because you can't accept that you're simply too old to manage your own affairs." "Too old," I repeated. "No life after 50. That's what you said when you called after 15 years of silence. Not hello, Mom, or I've missed you. Just demands for money you believe you deserve more than I do." "It's not about deserving," he snapped. "It's about practical reality. What can you possibly do with that kind of money at your age? While I have a family to support, a future to secure." "Your family," I said quietly. "Emma and Michael. My grandchildren whom I've never been allowed to meet. Who've been told I abandoned them, that I didn't want them." Something flickered in his eyes. Discomfort, perhaps, or a hint of shame quickly suppressed. "That's not relevant to this discussion." "It's entirely relevant," I countered. "Because this isn't just about money, Nathan. It's about the kind of person you've become, the kind of father you are, the values you're teaching your children." "Don't you dare question my parenting," he growled. "You have no right." "No right?" I echoed. "I'm their grandmother. I have every right to be concerned when I learn their college funds have been emptied. When I hear about the pressure they're under to be perfect, to never disappoint. When I discover they're being used as pawns in your desperate grab for money." "Used as pawns?" His laugh was harsh, disbelieving. "What are you talking about?" I leaned forward, holding his gaze steadily. "I know about your plan to use the children somehow to make me see reason. What exactly did you have in mind, Nathan? Bringing them to the guardianship hearing for emotional manipulation? Threatening their well-being if I don't cooperate?" For a moment, genuine shock registered on his face. Not at the accusation itself, I realized, but at the fact that I knew about it. Then his expression shuddered, became calculating. "You've been talking to Rosa," he said flatly. "That interfering woman who couldn't mind her own business." Rosa cares about your children, I replied, which is more than I can say for you right now. Don't you dare, he hissed, leaning closer. Everything I've done, everything, has been for my family. Has it? I challenged. Was it for your family when you cut me out of your life because I embarrassed you with my modest means? Was it for your family when you misappropriated client funds to cover failed investments? Was it for your family when you raided your children's future to maintain appearances? His face contorted with rage. You have no idea what it takes to maintain our position, our lifestyle. The pressure, the expectations. Expectations you created, I interrupted. A lifestyle you chose. A house of cards built on lies and appearances that's now collapsing around you. And you're enjoying this, aren't you? He snarled. Seeing me struggle while you sit on a fortune you did nothing to earn. Enjoying it? I shook my head sadly. Nathan, this breaks my heart. Watching my son, the child I raised alone after your father died, the boy I sacrificed everything for, become someone who would threaten his own mother, who would use his children as leverage, who would break the law rather than admit failure. Save your sanctimonious speeches, he snapped. If you cared about me, about your grandchildren, you would help us. Instead, you're hiding behind lawyers and investigators, clinging to money you'll never live long enough to spend. I did try to help your children, I reminded him. I added $5 million each to the trust for Emma and Michael, accessible when they turn 25. Money neither you nor Vanessa can touch or control. His expression darkened further, turning my own children against me, making them wait until they're adults for money they need now, for proper schooling, for opportunities. For the appearance of wealth, I finished for him. For the illusion of success you're so desperate to maintain. Nathan drained his scotch, signaling for another with a sharp gesture. His composure was cracking, the polished financial advisor giving way to the desperate man beneath. Here's what's going to happen, he said, his voice low and dangerous. You're going to call your lawyer tomorrow and dismantle that trust. You're going to transfer the funds to me to manage. You're going to drop this ridiculous investigation and fire whatever rent-a-cops you've hired to follow me. Or what? I asked calmly. His smile was cold, calculating. Or things will get very unpleasant for you. I have the guardianship hearing in 2 days. I have doctors ready to testify about your declining mental state. I have witnesses who will swear to your paranoid behavior. And I have 2 beautiful, articulate children who will tell the judge how much they want to meet their grandmother, but are afraid of the unstable woman she's become. The threat hung in the air between us, explicit, undeniable, and now recorded. My heart ached at the confirmation that he was indeed planning to use Emma and Michael this way, to manipulate them into unwitting pawns in his scheme. You would do that? I asked softly. Use your children that way? Have them lie to a judge? They wouldn't be lying, he countered smoothly. They don't know you. You are a stranger to them. And strangers can be frightening, especially unstable ones who hire investigators and make wild accusations. I looked at my son, truly looked at him, and saw a stranger wearing a familiar face. The little boy who had once held my hand crossing streets, who had cried in my arms when he was hurt, who had once loved me without condition or expectation. That child was gone, replaced by this cold, calculating man who would use his own children to manipulate the legal system. You've changed, Nathan, I said quietly. Or perhaps you were always becoming this person, and I simply couldn't see it. What I am, he said with sudden vehemence, is successful. Important. Someone who matters in the world. Not some small-town nobody living in a rundown house, shopping at discount stores, an embarrassment to everyone around her. The words should have hurt, but strangely they didn't. They revealed so much more about Nathan than about me, his desperate need for status, his equation of worth with wealth, his fear of returning to the modest circumstances of his childhood. Is that how you see me? I asked. As a nobody? I see you as an obstacle, he replied coldly. One that will be removed, one way or another. The guardianship hearing is just the beginning. If that fails, there are other methods. Are you threatening me, Nathan? His smile didn't reach his eyes. I'm explaining reality, Mother. You're 60 years old, living alone. Accidents happen to elderly people all the time. Falls. Medication mix-ups. Home invasions gone wrong. My blood ran cold at the implied threat, but I maintained my composure. You would go that far? For money. For my family's future, he corrected. For what's rightfully mine. The lottery money was never yours, I reminded him. Just as I was never merely an extension of you, existing only to serve your needs and ambitions. He leaned forward, voice dropping to a menacing whisper. Here's what you don't understand. I will win, whatever it takes. The guardianship is just the legal route, the preferred route. But if that fails, I have alternatives. People who can make problems disappear. People who owe me favors. People like the fake police officer who tried to enter my home? I asked. Or, are you planning something more direct this time? He sat back, his expression smoothing into something almost pleasant. This conversation is over. You have 24 hours to dismantle the trust and transfer the funds to me. After that, I can't be responsible for what happens. And the children? I pressed. Will you still use them at the hearing? They'll say exactly what needs to be said, he confirmed. Vanessa is coaching them as we speak. Emma is particularly convincing when she cries on cue. The judge will be quite moved. The casual cruelty of it, using his daughter's emotional performance to manipulate a court, was breathtaking. This wasn't just financial desperation. This was moral bankruptcy. One last question, Nathan, I said as he prepared to leave. If I were to die suddenly, one of those unfortunate accidents you mentioned, what would you tell Emma and Michael about their grandmother? He paused, considering. That you loved them very much, he said with chilling insincerity. That your greatest wish was for their father to secure their future with your generous legacy. With that, he stood, straightening his expensive suit. 24 hours, mother. Make the right choice. I watched him walk away, my heart heavy, but my resolve stronger than ever. The recording device had captured every threat, every admission, every indication of his willingness to use his children as pawns and to consider violence if legal means failed. Within minutes, Jensen appeared at my table, sliding into the seat Nathan had vacated. We got it all, he confirmed quietly. Every word. The implied threats to your safety, the admission about coaching the children to lie, everything. Relief washed over me, though it was tinged with profound sadness. What now? Now we take this to Detective Rodriguez, he said firmly. These threats, combined with the financial evidence from Marcus, are enough for protective measures at minimum. Possibly criminal charges. I nodded, gathering my purse with hands that trembled slightly despite my outward calm. And the guardianship hearing? After this? Jensen smiled grimly. Nathan's petition doesn't stand a chance. In fact, we may be able to get it dismissed before it even reaches the hearing stage. Back at the hotel, Elaine was waiting, her expression anxious until she saw us. It worked? Better than we could have hoped, Jensen confirmed, connecting his equipment to extract the recording. Nathan made explicit threats, implied he might arrange harm to come to Margaret, and admitted to coaching the children to lie in court. Elaine's expression was a mix of professional satisfaction and personal concern as she turned to me. Are you all right, Margaret? That must have been incredibly difficult. I sank into a chair, the adrenaline of the confrontation finally ebbing. I'm not sure I'll ever be all right with what my son has become, I admitted. But I'm certain now about what needs to be done. Through the night, events moved quickly. Jensen took the recording to Detective Rodriguez, who immediately assigned officers to watch Nathan's hotel. Elaine prepared emergency motions to dismiss the guardianship petition based on the new evidence of Nathan's threats and true motives. By morning, the legal landscape had transformed entirely. The judge reviewing Elaine's emergency motions ordered an immediate hearing for that afternoon, not the guardianship proceeding as originally scheduled, but a special session to address the evidence of threats and potential witness tampering. Nathan's been served with notice, Elaine informed me as we prepared to leave for the courthouse. His lawyer tried to get a continuance, but the judge refused given the nature of the allegations. Will the children be there? I asked, the question that had been weighing on my heart since Nathan's revelation about coaching them to lie. I've requested they be excluded, she replied, given the evidence that they were being manipulated into providing false testimony. The judge has agreed. They won't be present. Relief flooded through me. Whatever happened today, Emma and Michael would be spared the trauma of the courtroom, of being used as pawns in their father's desperate game. The courtroom was smaller than I had imagined, wood-paneled and formal. Detective Rodriguez was already there, conferring quietly with the prosecutor who had been assigned to review the potential criminal aspects of the case. Jensen sat behind our table, his expression professionally neutral, but his presence reassuring. When Nathan entered with his lawyer, a silver-haired man with an imperious manner, his eyes widened momentarily at the sight of Detective Rodriguez. He had clearly not expected law enforcement presence at what he had thought would be a routine guardianship hearing. Judge Harriet Monroe entered, a black woman in her 60s with keen eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She reviewed the materials before her with deliberate care before addressing the courtroom. "These are unusual circumstances," she began. "What began as a petition for guardianship has evolved into something far more complex. Before we proceed, I want to be clear. This is not yet a criminal proceeding, but evidence presented today may well lead in that direction. Is that understood by all parties?" Both lawyers nodded their agreement. "Very well," she continued. "Ms. Hoffman, as you filed the emergency motion, please present your evidence." Elaine rose, her manner confident and direct. "Your Honor, we have clear evidence that Mr. Collins' petition for guardianship over his mother is not motivated by genuine concern for her welfare, but rather by a desperate attempt to gain control of funds she has placed in an irrevocable charitable trust. Furthermore, we have documentation of financial improprieties at Mr. Collins' firm that suggest his motives are not merely greedy, but potentially criminal in nature." Nathan's lawyer rose immediately. "Objection, Your Honor. Ms. Hoffman is making unsubstantiated allegations that have no bearing on the guardianship petition." "On the contrary," Elaine countered, "they go directly to Mr. Collins' motives and fitness as a potential guardian, and they are far from unsubstantiated." Judge Monroe considered briefly. "I'll allow the evidence to be presented. Whether it has bearing on the guardianship petition remains to be seen." For the next hour, Elaine methodically presented our case, the financial documents from Marcus showing Nathan's misappropriation of client funds, Rose's testimony about the pressure on the children, and the overheard conversation about using them as pawns, and finally, the recording from last night's meeting with Nathan's explicit threats and admissions. As his own words filled the courtroom, cold, calculating, at times openly threatening, Nathan's face went from red with anger to ashen with realization. His lawyer scribbled notes frantically, occasionally whispering urgently to Nathan, who seemed beyond hearing as the evidence of his actions mounted inexorably before the court. When the recording reached the part where Nathan discussed coaching Emma to cry on cue for the judge, Judge Monroe's expression hardened visibly. When it continued to his veiled threats about accidents happening to elderly people living alone, she stopped the playback. "Mr. Reeves," she addressed Nathan's lawyer, "do you wish to respond to this evidence?" Nathan's lawyer rose, visibly shaken but attempting to maintain professional composure. "Your Honor, while some of Mr. Collins' statements were clearly inappropriate, they must be understood in context. He was frustrated by his mother's decisions regarding family funds, concerned about her mental state, and—" "Are you suggesting," Judge Monroe interrupted, "that frustration justifies threatening an elderly parent? That concern manifests as coaching children to provide false testimony to this court." "No, Your Honor," the lawyer backpedaled. "But Mr. Collins was under extreme pressure, and the nature of that pressure is itself concerning," the judge noted. "Based on the financial documents presented, it appears Mr. Collins may have committed securities fraud and misappropriation of client funds. Are you aware, counselor, that continuing to represent a client while knowing of ongoing criminal activity could potentially implicate you as well?" The lawyer paled visibly. "Your Honor, I was not aware of any financial improprieties until this hearing." "Then I suggest you confer with your client immediately," she advised. "This hearing will recess for 15 minutes." As Nathan and his lawyer left for a private conference room, Elaine turned to me with cautious optimism. "This is going well," she murmured. "Better than expected." "What happens now?" I asked. "Best case scenario?" The judge dismisses Nathan's petition outright and refers his financial activities to the SEC for investigation. Worst case, she delays ruling on the guardianship, but issues a protective order preventing Nathan from contacting you while the financial allegations are investigated. "And the children?" I pressed. "What about Emma and Michael?" "That's more complicated," she admitted. "Without evidence of physical abuse or neglect, the court won't remove them from their parents' custody based solely on financial crimes. But if Nathan faces criminal charges, it creates an opening for us to petition for visitation rights at minimum." When the hearing resumed, Nathan and his lawyer returned. Nathan noticeably subdued, his lawyer grim but composed. "Your Honor," the lawyer began, "after consultation with my client, we wish to withdraw the petition for guardianship at this time." A murmur ran through the courtroom. Judge Monroe raised an eyebrow. "May I ask the reason for this sudden withdrawal, Counselor?" "My client recognizes that his recent actions have been inappropriate," the lawyer stated carefully. "He wishes to step back and reassess his approach to family matters." "I see," the judge said, clearly unconvinced by this sanitized explanation. "And what about the financial improprieties documented in Ms. Hoffman's evidence? The apparent securities fraud? The misappropriation of client funds?" The lawyer hesitated. "Those matters would need to be addressed in a different forum, Your Honor." "Indeed they will be," Judge Monroe confirmed. "I am referring all evidence of potential financial crimes to the appropriate regulatory and law enforcement agencies for investigation." She turned her attention directly to Nathan. "Mr. Collins, while you have withdrawn your petition, I feel compelled to address what I've heard today. Your treatment of your mother, the threats, the manipulation, the apparent attempt to use your own children as pawns in a legal proceeding is deeply disturbing." Nathan stared at the table before him, unable or unwilling to meet her gaze. "Furthermore," she continued, "I am issuing an emergency protective order prohibiting you from contacting your mother, approaching her residence, or attempting to access any of her financial accounts or properties for a period of 90 days, during which time a full hearing will be scheduled to determine if a permanent order is warranted." She turned to me, her expression softening slightly. "Mrs. Collins, based on the evidence presented today, I find no indication whatsoever of mental incompetence or inability to manage your own affairs. On the contrary, you have demonstrated remarkable clarity and prudence in your financial decisions, particularly the establishment of the charitable trust and the provisions for your grandchildren." "Thank you, Your Honor," I replied quietly. "There is one additional matter," the judge continued. "Given the evidence that Mr. Collins and his wife have deliberately kept you from knowing your grandchildren while simultaneously misrepresenting the circumstances of your estrangement, I am inclined to consider a petition for grandparent visitation rights, should you wish to pursue that." Hope loomed in my chest, unexpected, almost painful in its intensity. "I would very much wish to pursue that, Your Honor." "Then I suggest you file the appropriate petition," she nodded. "Given the unusual circumstances, I would be willing to expedite such a hearing." With a final rap of her gavel, the hearing concluded. Nathan was escorted out first, his shoulders slumped, his lawyer whispering urgently in his ear. I remained seated, overwhelmed by the sudden shift in fortune, the possibilities that had opened before me. "We did it," Elaine said, squeezing my hand. "The guardianship petition is dead, and the judge practically invited you to file for visitation rights." "And Nathan?" I asked, my heart still aching despite everything. "What happens to him now?" Detective Rodriguez approached our table, her expression professionally neutral. "The financial evidence has been forwarded to the SEC and the U.S. Attorney's Office," she explained. "Given the apparent scope of the fraud, federal charges are likely. Mr. Collins has been instructed not to leave the city while the investigation proceeds." "Will he go to prison?" I asked directly. She hesitated. "It's too early to say for certain, but based on what I've seen, yes, probably. Securities fraud at this level typically carries a significant sentence." I closed my eyes briefly, absorbing the reality of what this meant. My son, for all his flaws and crimes, behind bars. My grandchildren with a father in prison. The scandal, the shame, the upheaval of their lives. Is there any alternative? I asked softly. Any way to address the crimes without destroying the children's lives completely? Detective Rodriguez and Elaine exchanged glances. There might be, Elaine said carefully. If Nathan cooperates fully with investigators, returns whatever client funds can be recovered, and accepts responsibility, a plea agreement might be possible. Still prison time, but potentially reduced. And the children? I pressed. What happens to them while their father is incarcerated? Will they stay with Vanessa? Presumably, Rodriguez nodded. Unless there's evidence she was involved in the financial crimes as well. The thought of Emma and Michael living solely with Vanessa, a woman who had participated in keeping them from me, who had apparently coached them to lie in court, was troubling. Yet the alternative, having them placed in foster care if both parents were implicated, was far worse. I need to think, I said, suddenly exhausted by the emotions of the day. About what happens next. About what's truly best for the children. 3 days later, I sat in a different courtroom, smaller, less formal, designed specifically for family matters. Beside me was Elaine. Across the room sat Vanessa with her lawyer, her expression a mixture of resentment and fear. Nathan was not present. Following the hearing, he had been questioned extensively by SEC investigators and FBI agents regarding the financial evidence. Released on bail but with travel restrictions, he had moved to a hotel, effectively separated from his family as the legal process unfolded. This hearing was about one thing only, my petition for grandparent visitation rights. Normally such cases took months to be heard, but Judge Monroe had indeed expedited the process, perhaps recognizing the unusual circumstances and the damage already done by years of separation. Judge Franklin, a kind-faced man in his 50s, reviewed the materials before him with careful attention. This is an unusual case, he noted. Typically, grandparent visitation is sought following a death or divorce when a parent attempts to cut off previously established contact. Here, there has never been contact at all, due to the deliberate actions of the parents. Vanessa's lawyer rose. Your Honor, while my client acknowledges that Mrs. Collins was not permitted contact with the children in the past, that decision was made by Mr. Collins. My client is not opposed to supervised visitation moving forward, provided certain conditions are met. My heart leapt at these words. Not opposed to visitation. After years of separation, of longing, of grief for the relationships I had been denied, here was an opening, small, conditional, but real. What conditions? Judge Franklin asked. First, that visits be supervised initially by a court-appointed monitor, the lawyer explained. Second, that Mrs. Collins refrain from discussing Mr. Collins' legal troubles with the children. Third, that visits occur on a gradually increasing schedule, beginning with brief meetings and extending as the children become comfortable. Judge Franklin turned to Elaine. Ms. Hoffman, your response to these conditions. Elaine glanced at me, receiving my slight nod of agreement. We find these conditions reasonable, Your Honor. Mrs. Collins' only desire is to develop a relationship with her grandchildren in a way that respects their emotional well-being and comfort. Very well, Judge Franklin nodded. I am granting the petition for grandparent visitation under the conditions outlined, with the following schedule: initial visits of 1 hour, twice weekly, for the first month. If those proceed without issue, extending to 2 hours twice weekly for the second month, and so on as determined by the court-appointed monitor's assessment of the children's adjustment. He looked at me directly. Mrs. Collins, I understand you've waited a long time for this opportunity. I urge patience as these children come to know you. They may have questions, confusion, even anger about the past. Your role is to provide a stable, loving presence as they navigate what is already a difficult time in their lives with their father's legal troubles. I understand completely, Your Honor, I assured him. My only wish is to be there for them in whatever capacity they need. 2 days later, I sat in a bright, cheerful room at the Family Services Center, my heart pounding as I waited for my grandchildren to arrive. The room was designed for family visits, comfortable furniture, toys and games for different ages, cheerful paintings on the walls. I had arrived early, bringing small gifts that Elaine had assured me were appropriate. A book for Emma about a girl detective, a beginner's music theory book for Michael. Ms. Winters, the court-appointed monitor, sat discreetly in the corner, her manner professional but kind. "They should be here any minute," she assured me, noting my nervous fidgeting. "Try to relax, Mrs. Collins. Children sense anxiety." I nodded, taking deep breaths, smoothing my simple dress for the 100th time. What would they think of me? What had they been told about this meeting? Would they be frightened, resentful, curious? The door opened, and Vanessa entered first, her expression tightly controlled. Behind her came two children, Emma, tall for 8, with serious eyes behind glasses just as Rosa had described, and Michael, smaller, half hiding behind his mother, one hand clutching a small toy piano. My grandchildren, my flesh and blood, standing before me at last. "Emma, Michael," Vanessa said, her voice carefully neutral. "This is your grandmother, Margaret Collins." Emma studied me with intelligent, assessing eyes. "Your dad's mom," she said. Not a question, but a statement of fact. "Yes," I smiled, fighting back tears. "I'm your dad's mom. I've wanted to meet you both for a very long time." Michael peered around his mother's leg, curious but cautious. "Why didn't we meet you before?" he asked, the directness of childhood cutting straight to the heart of things. Vanessa tensed, but Ms. Winters intervened smoothly. "Remember what we talked about on the way here? About how grown-ups sometimes have complicated feelings and disagreements. That's something your grandmother and your parents can explain more about as you get to know each other better."
I noddede gratefully her diplomatic redirection.
"Right now, I'm just so happy to finally meet you both. I brought something for each of you, if that's okay." I glanced at Vanessa, who gave a tight nod of permission. Emma accepted her book with polite thanks, immediately reading the back cover with the focus of a true bookworm. Michael approached more cautiously to accept his gift, his eyes widening as he saw the colorful music theory book. "Mom said you play piano," I explained gently. "I thought you might like this." "I play for Elise," he announced, pride momentarily overcoming shyness. "And Moonlight Sonata. The first part, not the hard parts." "That's amazing," I said with genuine admiration. "I'd love to hear you play sometime." The first 15 minutes were awkward, Vanessa watching vigilantly from a chair near the door, the children uncertain how to interact with this stranger who is supposedly family. But gradually, as we began talking about their interests, the atmosphere softened. Emma, it turned out, devoured mystery novels and harbored dreams of becoming a detective or possibly a judge. "Someone who finds out the truth," she explained seriously. Michael loved not just playing piano but composing his own simple melodies, which he demonstrated by tapping out a tune on the table. By the end of the hour, Michael had moved to sit beside me on the sofa, showing me pictures he'd drawn of the compositions he imagined. Emma remained more reserved, but her questions became less guarded, more genuinely curious about my life, my home, my interests. As Vanessa prepared to take them home, I thanked them all for coming. "I'm looking forward to seeing you again on Thursday," I said, trying to keep the emotion from overwhelming my voice. Emma paused at the door, turning back with an expression that reminded me painfully of Nathan as a child, thoughtful, assessing. "Did you really not want to see us all this time?" she asked directly. "Dad said you didn't want to be our grandmother." Vanessa started to intervene, but I caught her eye, silently asking permission to answer. After a moment's hesitation, she nodded slightly. I knelt to Emma's level, choosing my words with extreme care. "The truth is, I've wanted to know you both from the moment you were born. There were misunderstandings between your dad and me that kept us apart. Grown-up problems that had nothing to do with you. But I've always loved you, even from a distance." She considered this, her young face serious beyond her years. "Dad's in trouble, isn't he? That's why we're seeing you now." "Your dad is facing some difficult challenges," I acknowledged, aware of both Vanessa and Ms. Winters monitoring my words. "But that's not why we're meeting." We're meeting because I asked the court if I could finally get to know my grandchildren, and the judge agreed it was a good idea. Will Dad go to jail? Michael asked suddenly, the question clearly weighing on him. Vanessa moved quickly to his side. That's not something we need to discuss right now, Michael. Remember what Dr. Levin said about focusing on things we can control? I respected her boundary, offering only, whatever happens with your dad, please know that there are many people who care about you both, including me. After they left, I sat alone in the visitation room, emotions crashing over me in waves, joy at finally meeting Emma and Michael, sorrow for the years lost, anger at Nathan and Vanessa for the lies they'd told, and a renewed determination to be the stable, loving presence these children clearly needed in their increasingly turbulent lives. The following weeks established a rhythm. Twice-weekly visits gradually lengthened as the children became more comfortable with me. Vanessa, initially cold and vigilant, slowly thawed as she observed my interactions with Emma and Michael, perhaps recognizing that my only agenda was building a relationship with my grandchildren. Nathan's legal troubles, meanwhile, progressed with the inexorable machinery of justice. The SEC investigation uncovered even more extensive fraud than initially suspected. Client complaints mounted as the story broke in financial circles. His prestigious firm collapsed almost overnight, partners and associates scattering to distance themselves from the scandal. Through Elaine, I learned that Nathan was cooperating with authorities, providing information that might reduce his eventual sentence. The restitution to clients would be substantial, requiring liquidation of virtually all his assets, the house, the cars, Vanessa's jewelry, everything that had once symbolized his success. 2 months after our first visit, Vanessa requested a private meeting with me. We met at a quiet cafe near her apartment. She and the children had moved from their luxurious home to a modest 3-bedroom after the asset freeze. "Thank you for coming," she said, stirring her coffee absently. Gone were the designer clothes and perfect makeup. She looked tired, older, but somehow more authentic. "Of course," I replied. "How are the children handling everything?" "Better than I expected," she admitted. "Worse than I hoped. Emma has nightmares. Michael has started stuttering again, something he did as a toddler when he was anxious." She looked up, meeting my eyes directly. "But they look forward to seeing you. You've become important to them." The admission clearly cost her something, but there was no resentment in it, just a simple acknowledgement of truth. "They're remarkable children," I said. "You've done well with them, despite everything." She gave a bitter laugh. "Despite their father's criminal activities? Despite raising them to value all the wrong things?" She shook her head.
I'm complicit, Margaret.
I knew something was wrong with Nathan's business. I didn't want to know the details, but I knew. I pushed for the lifestyle, the status, the appearances. "I helped keep you away because Nathan said you were an embarrassment. You were protecting your family as you understood it," I said, not excusing her actions, but acknowledging the complex reality. "Nathan took a plea deal yesterday," she said after a moment. 5 years with possibility of parole after 3. Asset forfeiture. Permanent ban from the financial industry. I absorbed this information silently. 5 years. My son would spend 5 years in prison. My grandchildren would spend 5 years with a father behind bars. "He doesn't want the children to visit him there," Vanessa continued. "Says it would be too traumatic, too humiliating. I think he's right, but..." She trailed off, tears gathering in her eyes. "They'll be teenagers by the time he's released. So much lost time." The irony wasn't lost on me. Nathan now facing the same separation from his children that he had imposed on me. But I took no pleasure in it. "What will you do now?" I asked gently. "Start over," she shrugged. "I have a job interview next week, administrative assistant at a dental practice. Nothing glamorous, but it's something. My parents are helping with rent temporarily." She hesitated, then continued. "Which brings me to why I wanted to meet. The children's school. We can't afford it anymore. They'll need to transfer to public school next term. Emma is devastated. It's where all her friends are, the science program she loves. And Michael." She swallowed hard. The music program was the one place he truly flourished. I waited, sensing there was more. I'm not asking for money, Vanessa clarified quickly. I wouldn't. Not after everything. But I thought you should know what they're facing. How their lives are changing. Later that evening, I sat in my hotel room. I had extended my stay in Chicago indefinitely to be near my grandchildren, considering Vanessa's unspoken request. The trust one had established was irrevocable, with my grandchildren's portions accessible only when they turned 25. But that didn't mean I couldn't help in other ways. I called Elaine. I want to buy a house, I told her. Here in Chicago. Something modest but comfortable, in a good school district. And I want to establish education funds for Emma and Michael, not accessible by Vanessa or Nathan, but directly paying their school expenses if they choose to remain in private education. Are you sure?
Elaine asked.
After everything Nathan and Vanessa did? I'm not doing it for them, I clarified. I'm doing it for my grandchildren. They didn't create this situation. They shouldn't bear the full burden of their parents' mistakes. The next day, I met with Vanessa again and outlined my proposal. I'm not taking over your lives, I assured her. I'm not trying to buy my way into the children's affections. But I can provide stability when they desperately need it. Why would you do this? She asked, bewildered. After how we treated you? Because that's what family does, I said simply. Real family, not the kind based on appearances or advantages, but the kind that shows up when it matters most. 2 weeks later, I closed on a comfortable 4-bedroom house in a neighborhood known for its excellent schools. Not ostentatious, not a mansion like they had lost, but a real home with a backyard where children could play and a spare room I hoped might eventually become mine. The education funds were established with the same law firm handling the trust, ensuring transparency and proper oversight. Emma and Michael could remain in their schools, maintaining that small piece of stability in their dramatically altered lives. Nathan's sentencing hearing came in late autumn. I attended, sitting at the back of the courtroom, unseen by my son, who kept his eyes fixed forward throughout the proceedings. The judge was fair but firm, acknowledging Nathan's cooperation while emphasizing the severity of his crimes and the harm done to his clients. When it was over and Nathan was led away in handcuffs, I approached Vanessa, who stood alone, looking lost in the emptying courtroom. Would you and the children like to come to dinner tonight? I asked quietly. I think we could all use some family right now. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I told them, she whispered, about the sentencing. They're waiting at home with the sitter. Then let's not keep them waiting, I said, gently guiding her toward the door. That evening in my new kitchen, I cooked dinner for my grandchildren and their mother. The conversation was sometimes awkward, sometimes tearful, but ultimately healing. Emma asked direct, difficult questions about her father's crimes, about his sentence, about what would happen next. Michael was quieter, processing in his own way, occasionally breaking the tension with observations that made us all smile despite everything. After dinner, Michael disappeared into the living room, returning with a folded piece of paper which he solemnly presented to me. I made this for you, he said. I opened it to find a carefully drawn musical staff with notes arranged in a simple melody. At the top, in a child's careful printing, was written, "For Grandma Margaret." It's a song I composed, he explained seriously. About meeting you. Tears filled my eyes as I hugged him gently. It's the most beautiful gift I've ever received, I told him truthfully. Will you play it for me sometime? He nodded, a small smile lighting his solemn face. Maybe next visit. If Mom says it's okay. Later, as they prepared to leave, Emma approached me with a book I had given her at our first meeting, now dog-eared from multiple readings. Do you have any more like this one? She asked. About detectives and mysteries? I have a whole shelf of them at home, I told her. Next time you visit, you can choose as many as you like. Or maybe, she suggested hesitantly, you could read one to me, like grandmothers do in books. My heart nearly burst with love for this serious, wounded child reaching out in her own way. I would love that more than anything, I assured her. 6 months later, I stood in the doorway of my new home, no longer just a house I had purchased, but truly a home filled with evidence of my grandchildren's frequent presence. Emma's books stacked neatly on the coffee table. Michael's drawings pinned to the refrigerator. A piano in the corner where he practiced during visits. Vanessa pulled into the driveway, the children spilling out of the car with weekend overnight bags. Our arrangement had evolved naturally. The children stayed with me 2 weekends a month, giving Vanessa some respite and strengthening our bonds. "Grandma," Michael called, racing up the path. "I learned a new song to show you." Emma followed more sedately, already a preteen in manner, if not in years. "I finished my science project," she announced. "First place. I brought it to show you." As they entered, chattering about school and friends and achievements, I caught Vanessa's eye over their heads. She smiled, a genuine smile that would have been unimaginable a year ago. "Thank you," she mouthed silently. I nodded, understanding all that remained unspoken between us. The journey had been painful, the cost high. Nathan remained in prison, facing the consequences of his choices. But from the wreckage of broken trust and shattered illusions, something new had emerged, a family reconfigured but real, based not on appearance or advantage, but on love and truth. That night, after the children were asleep in their rooms that were now firmly theirs, with belongings that stayed between visits, I sat on my porch swing, looking up at the stars. The same stars that had witnessed my lonely vigil 15 years ago when Nathan walked out of my life. The same stars that had shone the night I won the lottery, setting in motion events I could never have imagined. My phone buzzed with a text message from Elaine. "Trust disbursements to charities completed for Q2. Reports available when you're ready." The money that had caused so much upheaval was now doing exactly what I had intended, supporting programs for abandoned elderly, for children without parents, for people who had been left behind. The irony wasn't lost on me that my own grandchildren had nearly fallen into that category, victims of their parents' mistakes. My life at 61 looked nothing like I had imagined it would a year ago. Not the quiet, modest existence I had accepted. Not the lonely future I had resigned myself to. Instead, I had found purpose, connection, and a family rebuilt from broken pieces. I thought of Nathan, alone in his prison cell. Despite everything, I had visited him once, 3 months into his sentence. The conversation had been strained, painful. He was still angry, still blaming others for his situation. But there had been one moment, just one, when he had asked about the children with what seemed like genuine concern rather than calculation. A seed, perhaps. A tiny possibility that someday, the man who emerged from prison might be different from the one who entered it. Not the boy I had raised and lost, but perhaps someone capable of genuine remorse, of change, of love untainted by ambition and greed. I didn't know if that transformation would ever come. But I did know that I would continue to build this new life, this reclaimed family, regardless of Nathan's choices. I would be the grandmother Emma and Michael deserved, loving them not for what they achieved but for who they were, supporting them without controlling them, offering wisdom without imposing expectations. In the quiet of the night, I whispered a truth I had learned at such great cost. Some wounds aren't meant to heal completely. They're meant to remind us of what matters, of what we can endure, of how we can rise from our deepest pain to find new purpose. The lottery ticket that had changed everything sat framed on my mantle, not as a reminder of sudden wealth, but as a symbol of the true prize I had won, the chance to rewrite the ending of my story, to reclaim what had been taken, to discover that life after 60 wasn't an ending but a beginning. Tomorrow, Emma would show me her science project. Michael would play his new song. We would bake cookies and take a walk in the park and simply be together, grandmother and grandchildren building memories to replace the years that had been stolen. And that, I realized as I finally went inside, closing the door on the night, was worth more than all the lottery millions in the world.